started to have second thoughts, not because of who the head coach will be. The case says the question isn't whether he can work with Bill Parcells or not. The question is, what job responsibilities will he have with a head coach who has his own GM and is director of football operations?
I'm very comfortable with the fact that I can work with Coach Parcells. Very comfortable with that. I just want him to finalize the deal, come to Tampa, and actually sit down and talk about how do we run the draft, how do we run free agency, how do we run the contracts, how do we run the salary cap, and get an understanding of how we all, this is not a business where you need more. I've never been one, there are certain franchises that have 5 salary cap guys. I don't know what we would all do. So I just want to sit down and kind of say, how do we do all this? How do we make sure that we're not overlapping? How do we make sure that we're not wasting a lot of time and energy here?
And as we reported to you at the top of the newscast, Parcells may not take the job. In fact, our source says Parcells told him it is not a done deal because he's still trying to decide if he wants to get back in the game.
I did have a couple of very strong interests expressed to me last year, and I just wasn't ready at the time. I love the game. It's a great game. If you like competition, the NFL is where it is. But as I said, it involves an awful lot, and before I'm ready to take that step, I have to think about it very, very strongly, and I just am in the process of doing that, and I'll decide that very, very shortly.
Parcells is one of 15 finalists for possible induction into the Hall of Fame. The big names in that group are Parcells, Art Modell, Bills quarterback Jim Kelly, and the late George Allen. Tony Dungy said this morning in a national sports radio interview that he will interview for the head coaching slots in Carolina and Indianapolis. He's working on his schedule right now to meet with both teams. Both the Colts and Panthers will also interview Jets defensive coordinator Ted Cottrell.
Denny Green. Earlier this week, Marty Schottenheimer and Tony Dungy took the fall, which now brings us up to half a dozen.
Ooh, that's the league average.
Baltimore's Brian Billick, though, wasn't anywhere near the top.
Problem was, ownership did nothing to deny it. As well liked as Dungy was around Tampa, you'd think the Bucs would come out all fired up fighting for their coach's job. Just the opposite happened.
In the city of brotherly love, the sun shines brightly and the temperature's above 40 degrees. It's all good for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as we get ready for the NFC wildcard game against the Philadelphia Eagles.
This is the second year in a row that these two have clashed in the first round of the playoffs, but this will be a much tougher game than the 21-3 victory the Eagles enjoyed a year ago.
A year ago, they met in a wild card matchup that meant everything. A week ago, they met in a game that meant nothing. Last Saturday, the Buccaneers and Eagles squared off again, and this time, Tony Dungy's job was at stake.
For Coach Dungy and everybody, we're going to do it. We're going to take care of business and do our thing. New year, baby. It's a new year. It's a new year. It's cold today, ain't it?
Well, there's no more talk. It's time to take the field and show what you have.
On paper, both offenses were overmatched and could ill afford to make a mistake.
Looking McNabb, firing McNabb. It's picked off at the 50-yard line. Dexter Jackson's got it to the 40. He's down to the 39-yard line.
We'll take it. Let's go home. Push it in.
But Tampa's first drive foreshadowed their entire afternoon. A good scoring opportunity converted into just 3 points.
Good snap, the kick airborne, plenty of leg Martine. It's good. And the Buccaneers lead 3-0.
Stay on your track. Stay on your track. I'm telling you, wear them out, run the ball. Wear them out, run the ball, just straight out.
It's Philadelphia's aggressive defense that gets after people. And while only capturing 1 sack, the punishment levied on Brad Johnson shaped the game. The abuse Johnson endured appeared to leave him trigger shy, and that, coupled with Tony Dungy's conservative offense, meant only 14 of 36 passes went to wide receivers.
Back goes Brad Johnson. He pumps. He slings it out to Dunn, who is hit at the 15 and dropped. The play will lose 4 yards, and the Bucs will have to settle for a field goal attempt.
You know this about Dunn. He's a dancer, all right? You got to have your head up. You got to gang tackle him and have your head up, right?
But the real fleet feet belong to Donovan McNabb, who behind the stellar offensive line danced circles around the Bucs' vaunted defense. Number 5 accounted for 161 of his team's 190 first-half yards.
McNabb at the 35, 30, 25, and out of bounds at the Bucs 22. A 38-yard run by Donovan McNabb.
One of the key weapons of this offense, Donovan running with the football.
And it was McNabb's success with his legs that set up his rifle of a right arm and the game's first touchdown.
He is rolling. He is rolling. Now he is firing. Caught for a touchdown by Chad Lewis. Chad Lewis about 2 yards deep in the center of the end zone. And McNabb finds him with a 16-yard strike. What a great play by McNabb. And a beautiful catch by Chad Lewis.
Hey, get ready. You got to put down right back out there, baby.
When the Eagles' offense was on the field, they did a terrific job handling all-pro defensive tackle Warren Sapp, who, due to a combination of counters and double teams, failed to register a single solo tackle.
3rd and 13. Back goes McNabb. He swings it out to Staley. He is at the 20. He's at the 15. He's at the 10. At the 5. He is in for the touchdown! What a great play! To Staley!
What a great job by the center, Hank Fraley, getting on the outside and getting the block that sprung Deuce Staley free.
Deuce Staley's 23-yard catching carry gave Philadelphia a double-digit lead. And when Carell Buckhalter scored the Eagles' first rushing touchdown in 8 games, the rout was on.
They fake the end around. The handoff goes inside. It is Buckhalter across the 15, across the 10. Buckhalter going in for the touchdown. Carell Buckhalter takes it 25 yards off the gut of the Bucs defense and in for the score. It was Dexter Jackson and John Lynch with shots at him, and they both missed. But Buckhalter, he is a force.
Consecutive losses after falling behind by 6 points or more is solid evidence that Tampa Bay does not know how to play catch-up. The result, when consistently forced to go to the air, 4 second-half interceptions. And the 3rd straight playoff game without a trip into the end zone.
Firing deep, and it is intercepted down at the 3-yard line. The 3rd interception by the Eagles today. Johnson again fires. It's intercepted. It's intercepted by David Moore. He's going to go. 30, 20, 10. Touchdown, David Moore. The game is over. There are still 2 minutes and 8 seconds left. But ladies and gentlemen, this is all she wrote. And the Eagles have thoroughly, decisively beaten the Tampa Bay Bucs. And the Eagles are heading to that town. The Union Stock Card Chicago is.
Yeah, I'm going home, baby. Going home. Oh, y'all didn't want tickets? Yo! Woo! Tampa Bay still gets playing the goal.
Or on the road, where they fell to 0-6 all-time in the postseason. Meanwhile, the only winning coach in Buccaneer history will have to set sail in search of gentler waters next season. For the Eagles, the win takes them to the divisional playoffs, where McNabb will try to blow away another top defense, this time in the Windy City.
The last time the Chicago Bears hosted the Philadelphia Eagles in a playoff game, the Fog Bowl. You guys remember that?
That was
Fog
great.
coming in, you couldn't see anything.
Hey, Mike Ditka on one side, Buddy Ryan on the other. You think they liked each other? Like you and me? Yeah.
You're my man. Don't worry about it.
It's late in the year. There's a lot of love everywhere here. All right, let's talk about these two defenses, though, as far as points allowed.
They'd hook the tuna. Instead, they snagged their line. They've got nothing. It's time to bait up again. The clock is done ticking on the Bill Parcells to Tampa watch. The slipper does not fit. Parcells informing the folks who own the Buccaneers this evening that he will not be on their payroll. This according to ESPN.com's Lynn Pasquarelli, who also reports The decision appears to be final. Sources close to Parcells say he didn't believe his heart was into making a solid 4-year commitment to return to coaching the Bucs. Parcells had sounded iffy about taking the job that reportedly was his even before Tony Dungy was fired. Just yesterday, Parcells publicly questioned his own energy level to do the job justice. A team official had said the Tampa Bay ownership would be devastated and shocked if Parcells did not become their coach. Mort, what happened?
Well, I think this is catastrophic for the Buccaneers. You know, they fired Tony Dungy. May they have fired him anyway? I'm not so certain with it, unless the ownership thought they could land Parcells. Rich McKay, the general manager, tried to talk them into keeping Tony Dungy. They didn't buy it. They fired him. And let me tell you what else is part two that is devastating about this is that Steve Spurrier, who would have been the next candidate, has taken a job with the Redskins. In fact, I'm just wondering whether Spurrier is wondering whether he pulled the trigger too soon.
The Bucs fired Dungy on Monday night, then formally began talks with Parcells the following day. The team had also interviewed Mike Tannenbaum, a Parcells protege, for the general manager's job, currently held by Rich McKay. Tonight, Tannenbaum turned down a chance to join the Buccaneers.
It's true love when you're
coming to coach the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Parcells made his decision tonight. He talked to Chip Carter about it from his home in New Jersey. Chip is with us now. You got him on the phone. Well, what was it like?
He sounded a little flat and a little tired, to be honest with you. It's probably been a long week for head coach Bill Parcells, but at 9 o'clock, I talked with Bill Parcells by phone. He personally confirmed to me that he will not coach the Bucs. When I asked him what the reasons were behind his decision, he told me, quote, Chip, I don't want to go into specifics. I'm going to keep the reasons to myself. Chris Field takes a look at why things suddenly got fishy for a coach nicknamed the Big Tuna.
On his weekly radio show taped Thursday, Bill Parcells said the rumors and reports that he had a tentative deal with Tampa Bay were far ahead of the facts.
It does involve a very, very strong commitment, and it does involve a lot of work, and you are responsible to the organization you work for, and you have to do it 100%. And until I feel that I can do that, I'm just going to deliberate and decide one way or another. If I choose not to coach again, then I feel certain that I'll be retired from football for good.
When the Jets confirmed their assistant general manager, Mike Tannenbaum, turned down the Bucs' offer of the general manager's position, many assumed that meant Bill Parcells would be next to turn down the Bucs' offer of head coach. The NFL investigation into tampering violations concerning Bill Parcells contacting assistant coaches under contract with other teams was another negative development. Parcells said his decision would be based on his desire to coach again.
It's not about anything other than whether I can make the commitment myself. That's all it is. Nothing else. It's not about where it is, what it is, how much, who's there. It's not about any of that.
Bill Parcells turned down the Bucs before in 1991, but changed his mind. Then owner Hugh Culverhouse turned Parcells down. Another deciding factor, the Hall of Fame ballot. Bill Parcells was nominated. A return to coaching would take him off this year's list. That final vote comes February 2nd, the day before the Super Bowl, and you can be certain the two-time Super Bowl winner, Bill Parcells, will be inducted. Chris Field, Fox 13 Sports.
All right, thanks, Chris. Now, tonight, the Bucs released this statement from Joel Glazer, quote, in our continued pursuit of a championship, we remain confident that our new coach will utilize the solid foundation that we have built to achieve our goals. Joel Glazer, the Buccaneer owner. Now, remember, we were the first ones to tell you nearly a week ago that Parcells was having second thoughts and that this was nowhere close to a done deal. Yesterday, we reported to you that our source close to Bill Parcells told him that the deal was no slam dunk. This is Bill Parcells' M.O. He didn't take the Jets job cleanly. He didn't take the Patriots job cleanly. In fact, his split from the Giants created a rift between Parcells and the late GM, George Young. Now, the question is this. Who else is on the Buccaneer wish list? We have learned tonight, confirmed it, that the Bucs will definitely contact multiple Super Bowl winner Jimmy Johnson. They will also talk to top college coach LSU's Nick Saban. Other names up for consideration, former Bucs assistant and now current Ram defensive coordinator Lovie Smith, Norv Turner also will get a phone call. And don't forget Marty Schottenheimer. Schottenheimer interviewed today with Steve Spurrier for the Redskins defensive coordinator position. Thought he, too, would be a candidate, although I think that would be the absolute last name on the list. You do not want Marty Schottenheimer. He's a coach who supposedly has a quick hook reputation, rules by the same kind of pressure situation that Bill Parcells works under, and has never been considered an offensive wizard, and his teams have never, always underachieved in the playoffs.
What about John Gruden? I mean, he's from this area. I know he's coaching the Raiders.
Right. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes, because Al Davis was upset that John Gruden didn't definitely pull his name out of the running when the Florida job opened up. But I think since then, things have quieted down, because after the Raiders beat the Jets, Gruden walked off the field, gave Al Davis a big thumbs up, and Al Davis returned it. So we'll see. What you need to happen is, if you're interested in Gruden, have the Patriots beat him this weekend, and all of a sudden his name could come up.
I'd put my money on Jimmy Johnson as the absolute cream of the crop for a lot of reasons.
Exactly. When you think of the money that the Bucs were offering Bill Parcells, it was $6 million a season. Jimmy Johnson's been out of the game for a while, might be itching to get back into coaching. Hard to turn around that kind of money.
A million.
He would be good.
And $1 million more, as you pointed out. And Steve Spurrier got it for the Washington Redskins. Now, we'll be back to Chip here in a minute. Cross-dressing Taliban soldiers try to cross the border.
They didn't make it very far, but this is also a new report out on Osama bin Laden. Mark Wilson is following these developments and others.
But they told Fox 13 Sports, in our continued pursuit of a championship, we remain confident that our new coach will utilize the solid foundation that we have built to achieve our goals. That was from Joel Glazer, the Bucs owner. Now, the question is, who is next on the list? A list that starts with another coach who won Super Bowls, because as Kevin O'Donnell tells us, a source close to Bill Parcells says the former head coach wasn't impressed with the level of Buccaneer talent.
On top of not having the heart to return to the NFL, sources close to Parcells tells us that Parcells feels the Bucs need to rebuild, and this situation is not a quick fix.
So for the second time in 10 years, Bill Parcells leaves the Bucs in the dark. Where do they turn to next? Well, there's the usual suspects: Marty Schottenheimer, Norv Turner, Jim Mora. But if the Bucs are looking for a coach with Super Bowl credentials, they need only to look south of Tampa Bay, where they can try to coax Jimmy Johnson out of retirement.
Johnson was the Bucs' first choice in '96, but his feeling then was he couldn't win with Trent Dilfer as his quarterback, so he said no to Tampa Bay. But what is his feelings about the Bucs' current situation? Does he like Brad Johnson? If not Jimmy Johnson, the Bucs may turn to LSU's Nick Saban. He's college football's hottest commodity and has reportedly been considered by Carolina. Despite his recent agreement to a $1.7 million per year deal with the Tigers, he's thought to be interested in the NFL. Before his 7 years as a college head coach, Saban was a defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns and a defensive back coach for the Houston Oilers. Other names the Bucs are considering are former Bucs linebacker coach and current Rams defensive coordinator Lovie Smith. But really, at this point, it's anyone's guess who will become the Bucs' next head coach. Even the Glazers don't know for sure. Kevin O'Donnell, Fox 13 Sports.
Our Parcells source, who has been accurate all week, said that Parcells told him this team needs some wholesale changes, needs to be rebuilt. Now, I called Jimmy Johnson at home tonight down in Key West, but his wife Rhonda answered the phone, told me he did not want to comment on whether he was interested in the job or not. Some are wondering if Steve Spurrier had a chance to land here. Our source says that Spurrier left Gainesville because he knew he was going to go to Washington. All right, the Lightning.
First to bring you exclusive details tonight on Bill Parcells' decision to turn down the Glazers. Our 2018 coverage begins now with 28 Sports Director Jay Crawford. Jay?
Jay, this is an interesting turn of events. Wow, anybody who knows anything at all about Bill Parcells knows that it is certainly his prerogative to change his mind. And he's done it before, and now he's done it again. Bill Parcells has left the Bucs standing at the altar for a second time. He did it to Hugh Culverhouse in the early 90s, and now he's done it to Malcolm Glazer. Len Pasquarelli covers the NFL for ESPN and was the first to confirm Parcells was no longer interested.
Where Bill Parcells is involved, there's nothing that's cut and dried. It's always a very complicated issue, and it was this time as well. He had all but agreed to a 4-year contract worth about $4.3 million a year, but he's out now, as Bill Parcells tends to be. Second time he's left the Bucs jilted at the altar.
Bill Parcells made it official tonight. He will not be coming to Tampa Bay. In an interview with Sports...
that oversight.
All right, now, we contacted Bill Parcells at his Seagirt, New Jersey home tonight. He told us he had nothing to add to his statement to Sports Illustrated and that the statement spoke for itself. Our 2018 coverage continues tonight with sports reporter Al Keck. He's at One Buck Place. Al, we've been waiting to hear what the Bucs are saying about this tonight. What is their reaction to all of this?
Well, they do have a very quick reaction. I'll get to that in just a moment. But you made a very good point here, Jay. The Buccaneers have lost out on Bill Parcells. The Buccaneers have lost out on Steve Spurrier, and the most successful head coach in Buccaneer history. He's out of town tonight. Chances are he's interviewing for head coaching jobs in either Carolina or Indianapolis. Here is the statement released by Joel Glazer. Earlier this evening, Bill Parcells told us he was not returning to coaching. In our continued pursuit of a championship, we remain confident that our new coach will utilize the solid foundation that we have built to achieve our goals. Again, that from Joel Glazer, a vice president with the Buccaneers. Now, the only way you fire a Tony Dungy is if you have a big name ready to step in and take his place, and the Bucs thought they had that in Bill Parcells. But answer this. What big-name coach would leave his current job now to take a job here when Tony Dungy was treated the way that he was treated? Now, the franchise is going back to square one. The glamour choice would be Oakland's John Gruden. He has ties to Tampa, but this could be extremely messy. Probably would not work because he is under contract in Oakland. And another possibility is Minnesota's Dennis Green, formerly of Minnesota, I should say. He led the Vikings to the playoffs year after year. But after his friendship, despite his friendship with Tony, he may be interested in that job as well. Some of the other names that'll come up, Marty Schottenheimer, he is talking to the Chargers. LSU coach Nick Saban, he's on the recruiting front right now. This could be a very bad time for him. And, of course, Jimmy Johnson's name will always come up. But, again, he maintains that he is retiring. And don't be surprised if Monty Kiffin's name comes up. He spent about an hour tonight here at One Buck Place. He did not want to talk, but of all the assistants on this current staff, he's the only assistant coach with head coaching experience. And if all this mess continues on, he may be an option. But definitely, this franchise was blindsided by this, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going back to square one in looking for a head coach, Jay.
All right, Al Keck live from One Buck Place. Al, stand by. We'll come back to you in sports. Guys, what this means now is what Al said. They're back to square one, and they were blindsided. The Glazers thought that with their verbal agreement that has been in place by all reports, and even the folks from ESPN that we talked to that have been talking to Parcells, they agree that this thing has been in place for a long time. But everybody's blindsided.
They had to back off from that so-called verbal agreement because of the tampering allegations.
Right.
So that left them very vulnerable, and it's come back to bite them.
It has, and I asked Len Pasquarelli tonight if some of these allegations of tampering and just the possibility that some of this is sort of smearing Parcells' reputation may have had something to do with Bill backing off, and he certainly wouldn't exclude that as a possibility. He said, you know, it's certainly possible.
Let me ask you this real quickly. The Glazers aren't the only tough owners of an NFL team. I mean, they aren't the only people who've maybe done something like this before. How much does this really affect their choices in finding another coach, where maybe somebody says, well, I don't know if I want to work for these people?
Well, it will not affect the up-and-comers of the NFL world, but they want to go out and grab an established coach who presumably could coach wherever they want.
And he says, maybe I'm not going to put up with it.
That coach may be less likely to deal with this whole mess. We continue our team coverage right now with 28 Tampa Bay's Nanette Miranda. She's live outside Raymond James Stadium, and I'm very interested to see, Nanette, what the fans' reaction to all of this is tonight.
Well, Jay, many Bucs fans are reacting with surprise. They thought the Parcells thing was a done deal. Some would say this is typical Bucs ball. It's like watching a great game fall apart. No deal on Parcells.
Shocking. Why not? Shocking. I thought he was coming. I really believe Parcells was coming.
Customers at the press box in Tampa couldn't believe the bombshell. As the news flashed across the big screens, the future of their beloved Buccaneers seemed doomed, with the Super Bowl even further out of reach, now that top choice Bill Parcells turned down the head coaching job.
We have no Dungy. We have no coach. We have no GM. And I'm a Bucs fan, season ticket holder, and God, you know, I don't know what we're going to do. We seem upside down and nowhere to go.
Some of the new favorites? Gruden's our man.
That's who we should have had the whole time.
From the Oakland Raiders?
Yeah.
Now, there is one coach available, and he's known to all of us, Tony Dungy. But fans really don't expect to see him back, especially because of the way the Glazers handled Dungy's termination.
He's going to the Colts or Carolina. They turned his back on him. Why would he come back here?
Some Buc fans tonight are wallowing in regret.
They should have kept Dungy in the first place. That's my opinion. They should have kept Tony and let him finish out his contract.
We've also heard the names of former Redskins coach Marty Schottenheimer and former Panther and 49er coach George Seifert as fan recommendations, but quite frankly, those names are only getting a lukewarm reception. They're just not in the league of a Parcells or a Spurrier. Jay?
All right, Nanette, Miranda, and you're absolutely right, not in the same league. Interesting to note that John Gruden's parents live here in Tampa. His mother is a teacher at Berkeley Prep. He would be an ideal choice, and he recently said that when folks, they filled the Florida job as quickly as they did, that after it was filled, he said, you know, I would have talked to the folks in Florida.
Right.
He is on the record as saying he would return here. He, of course, is under contract with the Oakland Raiders.
He may be busy with the Super Bowl at this point.
Yeah, he's still going in the
Well, how much are they scrambling? I mean, how soon do they have to have a coach in place?
Well, to give you a timetable, by Tuesday, they have to submit the list to the NFL of 5 players that will be exposed to the expansion draft because the Houston Texans come in next year. 5 names need to be turned in by the NFL. They could do that with Rich McKay and the current staff, but you'd like a coach to be in on that decision, too. I don't think it's going to happen by Tuesday.
So the players can make the decision what they want to do, depending on who's
Well, it'll probably come from Rich McKay.
All right, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
We'll see you again in a few minutes.
Well, here's a story 28 Investigates broke in late December.
Now a Tampa woman involved in an adoption scam could face prison time. The latest on that, plus this.
Slick, and it turns around and bites him. Yeah, and it backfired on him.
Now, Bill Parcells isn't exactly saying those words. He's not saying why he's not coming back, other than the fact that he doesn't think he has the energy. But his reputation was kind of being tarnished over the last couple of days, that maybe he was going behind Tony's back and this whole tampering charges from the NFL, and if possible that he just decided, you know what, it's not worth it. And he's pulled his name. All right, now, according to numerous sources close to Bill Parcells, Bill and the Bucs had a verbal agreement in place going back a month. But tonight, the Bucs found out verbal agreements aren't worth the paper they're not written on. Parcells has told the Bucs no for a second time. Here's what Bill is saying tonight. I'm staying retired. The demands of the job and what it would take for me to succeed were just too much. When asked if he would change his mind, he said, absolutely not. I'm done. This is the last job I will ever consider. I'm just not doing it anymore. Len Pasquarelli is close to Bill Parcells. He has been following this story for ESPN, and he told me tonight the Glazers now are in a real pinch.
Well, they look like desperate men because there's no Bill Parcells, there's no Steve Spurrier, who I'm sure they would have approached if they didn't think they were getting Bill Parcells. There's no Tony Dungy unless they're going to throw up roadblocks all over Tampa and keep him from leaving town. There's no really high-profile coach out there now, with the possible exception of a Dennis Green or maybe a Marty Schottenheimer, I think is going to end up in San Diego. You're stuck. And I think what they need to do now is turn to Rich McKay, beseech him to stay, see if Rich McKay can bail him out of this somehow with some sleight of hand and pull a coach out of a hat that maybe I haven't mentioned.
All right, suddenly I imagine Al Keck, who's live at One Buck Place. Rich McKay may be the Glazers' favorite person right about now.
Well, Jay, the Buccaneers needed to replace Tony Dungy with a big name. And the question is, any big name right now would be extremely leery coming into this situation after they see the way that Tony Dungy was treated. And the Buccaneers were so sure that Bill Parcells was their man that they showed little or no interest in Steve Spurrier. And imagine the roller coaster ride right now for Rich McKay. It's been up and down all week, and if he was key to this franchise before, imagine how important he is to this franchise right now. And I really question if there is a big name out there outside of a Dennis Green that would be interested in taking this job. The Bucs may have to look at a college coach or an assistant coach in the NFL. Jay?
Wow, how things change in a day. Al Keck, thank you very much. All right, tonight at the Ice Palace, the Lightning were looking
before saying his heart just wasn't in it. Well, today the team's general manager says the Bucs are staying optimistic.
I feel better about what lays ahead of us now than I did in 95, 96, because I knew how much work we had to do. You know, I'm comfortable we can get it done.
So what happens next? Dave Worth will have some answers coming up a little later tonight in sports. As you can imagine, this latest development in the coaching situation has fans talking about little else. At Buccaneer Heaven in Tampa, store clerk Joe D'Angelo has gotten calls from fans all over the country. They'd like to know more from the people who print the Buccaneer magazine, and shoppers are snapping up Bucs merchandise and offering their opinions.
They thought they could trust the Glazers that at least they'd have something better if they're going to get rid of their winningest coach ever, that they'd have something better lined up.
Still no word tonight from the Glazer family on who they've lined up for interviews, if anyone. Clearwater Police.
The mess made by the Glazer brothers. Some facts are coming out now on how this whole thing went down. ESPN.com is reporting that Bill Parcells had entered into a non-binding agreement with the Bucs about a month ago. And of course, that directly contradicts what the Glazers said at their news conference on Tuesday. Well, today, Rich said he's moving forward with the search for a head coach.
You can come from college, you can come from the pros, you can be an established coach. I mean, to me, this is a process. I've been through it one time before where you take your time and you make sure you talk to everybody and you do enough research and then you get comfortable in who fits us.
And then, what about Tony Dungy? Can you imagine the phone call if the Glazers suddenly tried to get Tony back up? Hello, Tony? Remember when we fired you? No, we were just kidding. Oh. Tony remains in Charlotte, North Carolina this weekend, interviewing with the Carolina Panthers. He got in his little jab when he was asked about Carolina's ownership. Tony said, they are first-class owners, the kind of people you want to be around. He'll leave for Indianapolis tomorrow. In the playoffs, Donovan McNabb in charge of the search, thank God, and he's not talking at all. The main thing here is John Gruden still has a year to go on his contract with the Oakland Raiders, so tampering becomes an issue for the Bucs. But owner Al Davis hasn't said anything yet about an extension, so that leads to talk that Gruden may be looking elsewhere. He's considered an offensive innovator, and he has ties to the Bay Area. His parents live in Tampa. His dad, Jim, used to coach for John McKay, and his brother is Jay Gruden, the former quarterback of the Storm in arena football. Here's the file on John. He is 38 years old. His regular season record with the Raiders, 38-26, 1-2 in the playoffs in the last couple of years, and as a collegian, he was a quarterback at the University of Dayton. Now, Rich McKay will spend the week in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl, scouting players, plus talking to coaching candidates, and he just may run into Tony Dungy there. Tony may be talking to the Colts. Tony left Charlotte today where he was talking to Panthers officials. Now it's the Indianapolis Colts who are hot on his trail. Tony will meet with Colts officials. That team seems to be a perfect fit since they need defensive help in the worst way. And, of course, Tony's a defensive coach. One thing for sure, Tony will be at the White House tomorrow for ceremonies honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Herm Edwards and Dennis Green will be there as well. And let's not leave out
with their defense. Now, Friday and Saturday, Tony was in Carolina talking to the Panthers. Tony says Carolina is better than its 1-15 record indicates, but Tony has some big decisions ahead of him.
I don't know who I favor. It's maybe who favors me at this point. I think you have to go through the process and find out as much as you can about each situation and, figure out if they want you. I think that's the biggest thing.
The NFC Central has been bounced out of the NFL playoffs. Check out the Packers today.
Simply put to you, what happened? I know there's a lot to cover here, but what happened with this coaching search?
I think the best way to put it is that the Glazers just got bamboozled. They fell in love with Bill Parcells, as many people have, as Hugh Culverhouse once did. And they fell in love with a man who might be the most indecisive man on the face of the earth. He just cannot decide what he wants to do, although I think this is it. I don't think we'll see Bill Parcells coaching in the NFL again.
What strikes me about this folly is that they were in a great situation, the Glazers were. They had a chance to play two fantastic coaches against each other, leverage them against each other, Spurrier and Parcells, but instead they totally passed on Spurrier and could have said the first one to take it gets it and would have wound up with a wonderful coach. Well, and they end up with nothing.
JP, as I wrote today in the Tribune, this is what happens when you let children play with toys unsupervised by adults. The Bucs, the Glazers have one of the best general managers in football, one of the best staff of scouts, football people. They didn't listen to them. If they'd have just listened to Rich McKay, if you want to get rid of Tony Dungy, okay. Rich wasn't in favor of it. He thought it was best to continue on the way things were going, maybe get another offensive coordinator. However, if you're going to fire Tony Dungy, as they were adamant about doing, let Rich McKay decide the next step. Don't go to one guy and say, he's our guy, and as you say, not playoff, because the Bucs even made an attempt to talk to Steve Spurrier. They sent somebody out there and said, hey, Steve, before you do anything with Washington, come back to us. That Steve knew. He read the tea leaves like everybody else. He believed strongly that Parcells was coming, as a lot of people did. And he just said, look, $5 million a year, I can't pass this up. And, you know, he may be having second thoughts now in Washington. That's a lot of what we're hearing, because he's starting to find out that Dan Snyder, he presents this beautiful package, and then you unwrap it and you look at it and it's like, wait a minute, is this the outfit that Ray Lewis is wearing or what?
What? All right, quickly, the John Gruden saga. Can the Bucs get him? Logistically, this is going to be kind of a touch-and-go thing.
I think the next 3-4 days in Mobile, Alabama are going to tell the tale here. I think Rich McKay is going to go up there. He's going to do a lot of fact-finding. He's going to talk to the Raiders about it. You know, is it even feasible? The Bucs do not want to give up draft picks. They will, maybe, if it's not a package that's going to cripple them over the next couple of years. They would like to have John Gruden. We'll see how it plays out over the next few days. I think by the end of the week, we'll have a very strong answer on whether he's coming or not.
Yeah, the Bucs really aren't in a position to give up draft picks because they need young talent infusion right now. So giving up a couple of ones is not an answer. You'll be going to the Senior Bowl, Roy, so we'll be looking forward to your reports in the paper, maybe on News Channel 8, and you'll keep us abreast if anything happens.
Sure will.
All right, we'll keep it right here. All right, when we come back, Chris Thomas will join us, and we'll try and add some historical perspective to this week that was. Yeah, former Bucs owner Hugh Culverhouse will chime in with some oldies but goodies. Stay with us.
Shopping list, and who can blame them? He is the hottest name in coaching these days. 40 wins in 4 seasons. His parents live in Tampa. 1 year left on his deal with the Raiders. It would take money and draft picks to get him away from Al Davis. And Tony Dungy says, you know, it's great to be wanted, and it appears the Colts want Tony Dungy. More talks today. Tony met Friday and Saturday with Carolina, but Indy has been very aggressive. There are even some reports that a deal could be done by Tuesday. You know, what a difference.
Candidates out there, and that'll play itself out.
Joe, are you saying you just fired Tony Dungy, who's taken your team to an NFC championship game with no thought to who may replace him? Is that what you're telling us?
Well, you step one. Go ahead.
No, I mean, now we bring in grandstanding man. Chris Thomas. Yes, from the franchise that brought you the Lehman Bennett. Thank you for coming to the press conference.
Yes, great.
Bo Jackson, thanks for drafting me. I told you not to. And now the Glazers. We have not spoken to Bill Parcells or had sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky Lines. This is what we're doing. It's been quite a week for the Buccaneers, Chris.
That woman, Miss Parcells. Parcello-Winsky. Well, it's been quite a life for me. I seem to be tagging after spicy owners. It's just, I've had Bob Irsay, who performed a bodily function in my vicinity I rather hadn't done one time, and then moved the Baltimore Colts out of a city and out of a state under the cover of darkness in the middle of a snowstorm. Yes. I was a party to that. Followed by Hugh Culverhouse, the Lehman Bennett, the Bill Parcells subsequent. I'll be the coach, but I'm not the coach. Followed by the Glazers. We'll pay for half the stadium. Oh, no, we won't. Followed by the Glazers firing a coach, having no one to replace him. So I might be, how would we characterize this?
I think you would be God.
God. I must be God. But what is that?
Gatekeeper of dopes.
Gatekeeper of dopes works for me, absolutely. When it comes to the owner division, yeah.
You've had...
You know, but wait a minute, let me say one more thing here. Just as England had Churchill in its hour of greatest need, thank goodness the Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise this past week has had in its hour of greatest need, Rich McKay.
All right, well, let's begin with the firing. That's a great point.
Yes.
He will save the franchise, hopefully. Let's begin with the firing of Tony Dungy and how that was handled. A lot of criticism coming the way of the Glazers, and Rich McKay even talked about it in terms of them losing credibility that they had built up. This is what Rich had to say at the press conference earlier this week.
Then we kind of made a bad decision that night in the sense that they probably talked to Tony about 9, and the decision was made, you know, we should make a release tonight as opposed to sleeping on it and doing it in the morning. We probably should have done it in the morning. I don't know that there's any appropriate way that they could have released, terminated, or dismissed a guy with Tony's stature, reputation, and class, and done it right. But that's what happened in the sense of why that release went out when it did. It probably shouldn't have. Probably should have done it the next morning.
Yeah, probably.
In hindsight.
In hindsight.
And Tony's agent, to be fair, forced the issue.
As well, he should have forced the issue. Listen, and it appears apparent that if the Glazers were wanting to make a change, there's a very civil way you do it. You call Ray Anderson, Dungy's agent, at some point subsequent to this entire mess last week, and you say, we really are not going to intend to utilize the last year of Tony's contract. We're not going to announce it. We want you and Tony to be aware of it so you can begin to make your plans. I think that's how rational, nice people deal. But in the National Football League, I'm not sure how much rationality or niceness there really is, especially after this past week. So was it handled poorly? Certainly. You just heard what Rich McKay said, and that's not what he really meant to say. He was being nice.
Yeah.
We need more nice.
All right, let's move on to the jilting of Bill Parcells for the second time. And certainly the Glazers have to take some culpability here. But I want to say this. Parcells, I mean, you talk about the smell of rotten tuna. What he has done in terms of to the fans of Tampa Bay twice now, this one totally unconscionable. And to go for almost a year lobbying for a job, get everything you want on paper, and then at the last moment say, you know what, I don't think my heart's in it, is one of the most unprecedented strokes of selfishness I have ever seen on in a public stage this big.
The only saving grace to any of it, and I doubt there is any for Parcells, would be if, in fact, he never comes back to coaching. Because if he does now, then everything you just said, I'll multiply it by 3. There were a lot of lives affected by that hanky and panky that went on last week. And I'm not talking about Tony Dungy. He got fired. He'll get a job. He'll be employed in the next couple of weeks. Rich McKay had to come to a gut-wrenching decision. Good thing he stood up for this community and for that franchise. But think about all the assistant coaches who have been contacted by Parcells. Would you be interested if I come back? Think of all the lives here that have been directly affected by this sort of Machiavellian maneuvering. And no, he comes off as badly as the reputation he has deservedly built. It's awful. It is.
I think he's tarnished his legacy, and it will have certainly a consequence when it comes to Hall of Fame voting.
I doubt it.
All right, now let's move on to possible candidates. And I think everyone talking about John Gruden, who would obviously be a tremendous fit.
Sure.
A genius offensive mind, a young guy who has ties to this community. And if they get him, the McKay-Gruden combination would certainly make everybody forget there even was a tuna episode.
Absolutely. It pushes all that to the background. Now the question is, they can get Gruden if they want him. What are they willing to pay Al Davis? Because if anyone thinks that with a year left on a contract, that Al Davis is going to let John Gruden go quietly into the night without extracting something in return, you're nuts. Forget about it. So what is the price you're willing to pay to acquire Gruden? Now, as you would point out, and aptly so, and rightly so, JP, that there's a double-edged sword at work here for Davis. If he keeps Gruden as a lame duck coach, he's basically cutting off his nose to spite his face next season. All the players will know it. Doesn't work for anybody. But we are dealing here with Al Davis.
He can get compensation now in the form of either cash, which we know he likes, or get nothing when Gruden leaves, and almost certainly will after next season. There are other candidates out there if Gruden cannot be had. Offensively is where you might want to go. Norv Turner's name has certainly been mentioned.
Norv Turner's a fine football man. He's got all the requisite experience, things that you would like on an offensive side. No, he would only be considered in this community as a retread, and a one that hasn't succeeded. It doesn't work for me. You either go after one of the best top-flight offensive, not defensive coordinators, by the way. Now, people are going to yell about Marvin Lewis, and he's going to get a job in the NFL, but replacing Tony with another defensive guy right now would be a mistake. Find an offensive mind, and Gruden, among all the candidates or names that I've heard, that would make the community, as you suggested, forget about all this other stuff, that's the guy. So go get him.
If they can. And
if they can.
Certainly up for grabs. When you look and kind of put a perspective on this entire week, where does it leave this franchise?
I don't know. You know, maybe the question is, what if Parcells had taken the job, McKay had quit, and 2 years from now, then where would the franchise be?
Yeah.
See, that's the better way maybe to phrase the question. So in the end, at the end of the day, as everyone likes to say, I like to say that, at the end of the day. Is mine almost over?
Almost.
At the end of the day, that all of this has happened for all the slimy reasons. If the Bucs were to get a Gruden and go on to get to a Super Bowl, then who cares?
Well, let's hope that's the way it plays out in this very interesting week. Chris, thank you so much for coming.
And the mighty guardian of dope. Nice to be here.
You are gone. All right, when we come back, much more on Sunday Sports Action.
Should have known there was something fishy about the tuna, Bill Parcells, but this is not the first time Parcells has burned the Buccaneers, and it makes you wonder what they've learned from last week. Then again, if this team ever wins a Super Bowl, all this, believe me, will be forgotten. Our own Jay Crawford has some definite ideas about the Buccaneers soap opera. Here's Jay's take.
A whole lot has happened to our football team in the span of a week, and most of it stinks. It all started last Friday with what appeared to be a well-timed leak from the Glazer camp. Super Bowl or bust. Dungy would be out, Parcells would be in. The Bucs fell flat in Philly fighting for their coach, and the wheels of the Glazer machine continued to roll. Tony was promised a Tuesday morning meeting to discuss his future. He was fired Monday night. Tuesday came and Tony spoke out, as always, exuding class. He made no excuses. 3 hours later, the brothers Glazer stared right into the cameras and insisted there'd been no contact between their camp and Camp Parcells. Yet somehow, the night before, they had agreed to interview a 32-year-old Parcells disciple to become the team's new general manager. The only problem is they already had a general manager, the other building block of the organization, Rich McKay. That takes us to Friday night. After learning he was being judged guilty by Glazer Association, Bill Parcells dropped the bombshell. He's not coming to Tampa Bay. So now the Glazers have fired the team's winningest coach, alienated its most successful general manager, and the big tuna slips off the hook on the way to the boat. Exactly what happened to make Bill change his mind remains a mystery, but here's the theory. From Monday to Friday came charges of wrongdoing from every corner of the NFL. Dungy's agent said he'd leave it to the Glazers and Parcells to answer the way the deal came together. Bucs assistant coaches accused Parcells of breaching the coach's code of ethics by pursuing a job that hadn't yet been vacated. And then came word from the NFL. They were investigating the Bucs and Bill Parcells on tampering charges. And that seemed to be the final straw. If there's a saving grace for the Glazers now, here it is. It appears Rich McKay is ready to forgive and forget, so there is hope for the future. The decision to fire Tony Dungy was the Glazers to make, and a case can be made for making it. But at the end of the day, what speaks louder about the decision itself is how it was carried out. That's how owners build their reputation, and in turn determines what kind of people they can lure to join them. The whole thing was handled completely wrong, and because of it, the NFL is laughing at Tampa Bay once again.
And now the Buccaneers get ready for the expansion draft. Who do they release? And they'll scout the Senior Bowl coming up next week in Alabama. Of course, keep it right here on ABC 28 for the best in coverage of the Bucs soap opera, The Young and the Coachless. So that's our first Sports Zone. Join us on next Sunday. We'll know the Super Bowl teams. In fact, we'll get your pick on who wins in the Big Easy in New Orleans. Our thanks to Scott Brantley and Seth Greenberg. For Jay and Ann, I'm Al Keck. Have a great week, everybody.
Motion to both directions, and Marshall Faulk barrels into the end zone. Into the flat. Completes to Allen. Breaks out of the tackle.
His hand. He doesn't want a lame duck coach. He might be willing to deal with the Bucs. Reportedly have Gruden on the top of their wish list. To the Mort report, the coach says, not so fast.
I've got 1 year left on my contract. I have nothing to report. There have been no renegotiations. There have been no years added to my contract. I'm not worried about it. And it'll all work itself out. I don't have anything to report today other than the season is over. We're deeply disappointed, and I plan on living up to the contract that I signed.
I don't think John Gruden wanted to make too much of a public spectacle today about his status, but I have some good sources, strong understanding that Gruden and his agent Bob Lamont is going to make clear to the Raiders, if not today, certainly by tomorrow, that they would like an opportunity to talk with another team, and we believe that team certainly is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That he certainly would honor the last year of his contract if forced to, but that they would not sign an extension at this point, and this will be his last season coaching the Oakland Raiders.
Gruden held forth on a variety of subjects today, including the most infamous incomplete pass in playoff history, Tom Brady's apparent fumble, which was overturned by the refs, allowing the Patriots to eventually win in overtime. Now, Gruden has been apprised of the tuck rule, but he's still not buying.
I'll go to my grave thinking it was a fumble. And I believe the pictures speak volumes in terms of what the play was truly about. And I'll just leave it at that. I've heard a lot of analysts talk about the play. I've heard the head of officials talk about the play. I believe it was a fumble, but it wasn't a fumble. It was an incomplete pass, and the Patriots are moving forward in the playoffs, and we're not.
Well, Gruden may be in line for the Tampa Bay job. The Bucs' former coach has become a hot commodity. Tony Dungy's agent says that Dungy will likely have a new job by the end of the week. Dungy interviewed with the Panthers Friday and Saturday. The Colts flew down to Tampa to talk with Dungy on Sunday. Colts owner Robert Irsay has reportedly said he won't be outbid for Dungy's services.
Me here, so... Well, here we are. You couldn't go anywhere, of course, anyhow. Lee Steinberg is the agent for Warrick Dunn, and Warrick Dunn's agent saying today that he can no longer see a situation where Warrick coexists in the same backfield with Mike Allstott, which means, and I don't see the Bucs getting rid of Mike Allstott. One of the two has to go, and it looks like Warrick's time with the Bucs is probably all finished. Or the Indianapolis Colts both want Dungy. They were highly impressed with the coach during the interview process. Good news for him. Now, in the meantime, word out of Raiders camp tonight has John Gruden ready to ask Al Davis for permission to talk to the Bucs about the head coaching job here. Gruden is reportedly fed up with Al Davis and wants nothing to do with a contract extension to stay in Oakland. This is John from earlier today.
Again, I'm not going to publicly talk about my contract or a lot of the things that I want personally. You know, this is a we business, and I'm part of the Oakland Raiders. I've been a part of the Raiders, and I think people realize that the speculation is part of the game. But at some point, everything will work itself out.
Okay, in the NBA tonight, a nice yardstick.
Bidding war with Carolina over Dungy, and that there was no way they were going to be outbid. Here is the deal. It's a 5-year, $13 million contract, which is about $4 or $5 million more than the Panthers were offering. Also, that Panther contract was heavily backloaded. Now, we called and spoke with some of the Buck assistants in Mobile, Alabama today, and they told us that Dungy's staff of assistants wants to talk to him about working in Indianapolis. Now, Colts owner Jim Irsay says Tony Dungy was the one man he wanted for the job, and he told him that right up front.
I called him up and I said, I don't want Bill Parcells. I don't want anyone else on the planet. I want Tony Dungy to be the coach of the Colts. And that meant a lot to him, because even with his accomplishments, when you go through what he went through in Tampa Bay, you know, it's a difficult thing. And when it was that conversation late at night, I think that really got the ball rolling. And, you know, his comments was, boy, it's really nice to be wanted.
So the Bucs get John Gruden. His agent Bob Lamont told newspapers in San Francisco that there is no way that Gruden's going to stay with Oakland after the last year of his contract is up. Lamont says this isn't about leverage. There is zero chance that Gruden will coach the Raiders in 2003. That forces Al Davis to make some kind of a move. Gruden earns just over $1 million a season and is one of the lowest paid coaches in the league. And Gruden is right now in Mobile, Alabama, and you know he's going to have a conversation with Rich McKay while he's out there. don't forget also that Gruden's parents live right here in Tampa. So
Yeah.
And he's how old? He's only 35.
Yeah.
He's going to look much older about his time.
But aren't you happy for Tony Dungy?
Talk about landing on your feet. You double your salary and you get in a bidding war after you get canned.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's nice to see one.
It is.
Yeah,
Sure
is.
All right.
Well, those two
Dungy for a 5-year, $13 million deal, but really it's Colts owner Jim Irsay who thinks he's getting the better deal because when he fired Jim Mora, he never thought Tony Dungy would be available to take the job.
We had no idea we'd have a proven winner in a guy like Tony Dungy who really takes care of the defensive side of the ball, and I think whose temperament fits Peyton's perfectly. When Peyton comes to the sidelines and he looks into someone's eyes and he sees Tony Dungy's eyes, there's a calming intensity about Tony Dungy that those two guys I know will hit it off. There is no question that this is the piece of the puzzle, I think, that is the final piece. And to think about Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy both being such young guys where you have a head coach and quarterback for the next decade leading your franchise, as an owner, I'm going to sleep well tonight.
All right, Martin Gramatica signs a 7-year deal.
And he's ready to take a run at a Super Bowl with another team. That's going to be strange. The winner of the Tony Dungy sweepstakes, the Indianapolis Colts. And now that the fight for his services are over, Colts owner Jim Irsay is coming out and saying that there's no way he was going to be outbid for Tony's services. Tony is Irsay's guy, and that has to make Tony feel pretty good right about now after the mess he had to go through here with the Buccaneers. Tony will get in the vicinity of $13 million, we're hearing, for 5 seasons. That's on top of the $1.8 million buyout he received from the Glazers. Tony will talk to reporters in Indianapolis. He'll do that tomorrow. Coming up in sports, we're going to hear from Jim Irsay on landing Tony Dungy. Plus, the Bucs today had to turn in their list of players that will be exposed for the expansion draft. There's 5 players here. That list won't be made public until Friday, but we have our hands on 2 of the names.
Sideline. Dungy officially takes over the job as head coach today, and he says what he learned in 6 seasons with the Bucs will make him better with the Colts. Tony Dungy knows he has to take the Colts to the Super Bowl, and he says the playoff experience he had in Tampa will help get him there.
The biggest thing that I think I'll take out of it is that it's tough to get all the way to the top. That's the goal that you want. You can get close, and that next step really takes just that much more intensity to get there.
Getting to the Colts facility got Dungy's attention. In Tampa, he left an aging building with temporary trailers behind. The Colts gave him a bird's-eye view of his new office.
The helicopter ride in, looking at the facility and saying, hey, here's where we're going to go to work to try to win a championship. That was the biggest thrill I've had in a long time.
The biggest difference to Dungy is the state of the Colts today versus the state of the Bucs 6 years ago.
We knew we had a big rebuilding project there. Our goal was to really get to where we were a competitive team, a playoff team year in and year out. This team has been to the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years. This team has a real solid nucleus of guys that have won in the NFL. So it's a different emphasis. Our emphasis now is making sure we all get on the same page, making sure we get back to that level where they were a couple of years ago.
Now, sources in Mobile, Alabama tonight told me that Dungy will have some Buccaneer assistants working with him. Clyde Christensen will be his quarterback's coach. Jim Caldwell will work with his wide receivers, and Chris Furster will coach tight ends. Now, Furster coached the offensive line in Tampa, but Dungy's keeping Howard Mudd, the offensive line coach, with the Colts. Dungy is also asked about permission to talk with Monty Kiffin and defensive line coach Rod Marinelli, but the Bucs have not yet granted him permission to talk to those two. Rich McKay, I know, wants to hold on to Monty Kiffin. I've got the 5 names the Bucs put on the expansion list for the Houston Texans. Marcus Jones is the biggest name on that list, and his salary cap hit is over $3 million next season. Future Hall of Famer Randall McDaniel was exposed, and the Bucs put free safety Eric Vance up there, along with Jeff Gooch and long snapper Sean McDermott. The expansion draft is February 18th. The Lightning
an application over there today, and the Bucs told me, you know, we're not taking applications.
I was going to say, I thought they would say, well, we'll put it in the pool.
You're more of a
we'll look it over.
guy anyway. Yeah, that's my specialty. I don't know anything about offense. So
John Gruden's still alive, though, huh?
Yeah, well, that's what we're hearing. The names really are still the same. John Gruden of the Raiders still at the top of the Bucs wish list, but we all know his future clearly in the hands of Al Davis. And what a frightening thought that must be tonight for John Gruden. As the process moves on, though, we can tell you Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis, this, according to the Baltimore Sun, has been contacted by the Buccaneers. There he is. That's actually Nick Saban. He will interview for the job this weekend. Marvin Lewis will. The other names out there, Norv Turner and Nick Saban. Now, because the Bucs aren't saying anything new, we thought we'd dig into our video vault tonight. We're going to take you way back, and this will be Brian Glazer, the day his father Malcolm bought the football team. Listen carefully.
We're not going to be running the football operation. We are not football people. We have good people running the operation. Our job is to get involved in the community, to get the people to get to know us, to get tickets sold, to put people in the stands, and get the place going crazy.
I think they've effectively, well, the place is going crazy, no doubt about it. That was a while ago, wasn't it? College basketball tonight, we have...
Raiders want for John Gruden. We'll have more on the Bucs coaching soap opera coming up in the... We're hoping to spend some time on Bourbon Street. Oh, how this franchise has changed since their playoff loss at Philly. No Dungy, no Parcells, no Spurrier, and some say no credibility. What's the latest on the Buccaneers search for a new head coach? Well, the talk tonight continues to surround the Ravens defensive boss, Marvin Lewis. Word is he's the choice of general manager Rich McKay. Reports that McKay wants to open contract talks with Lewis. But Lewis is a defensive coach, and as you know, the Bucs need help with their offense. Now, the Raiders' John Gruden is an offensive coach. He loves that West Coast passing game. Well, the Glazers want McKay to see exactly what Al Davis wants to let Gruden out of the final year of his contract. You're talking money, draft picks, maybe more. No idea when the Buccaneers will find their man.
The Patriots found their place. It's the second biggest upset in Super Bowl history. The Rams struck first with this 50-yard field goal from Jeff Wilkins. But when the Rams are forced to kick a field goal because they can't get into the end zone, that's not a good omen. Neither is this. The Patriots' Ty Law intercepts Kurt Warner in the second quarter and runs it back 47 yards for the touchdown. That was the first of 3 turnovers that the Patriots turned into points. Suddenly, the Rams were down 7-3. Then, just before halftime, another turnover. A fumble leads to this Tom Brady touchdown toss to Davis Patton. That puts the Patriots up 14-3, forcing the Rams to shake their heads as they headed into the locker room. Second half action now. Another turnover leads to 3 more points for the Patriots. Otis Smith picked off Warner after a bad pass. The first St. Louis touchdown didn't come until the 4th quarter. Kurt Warner decides to take care of business himself with the quarterback sneak. That put the usually high-scoring Rams within 7. Later in the 4th, the Rams rally with this 26-yard touchdown pass to Ricky Kroll. The game is tied 17-all with 2 minutes left in the game. But the Patriots drive to the end zone, and on the final play of the game, Adam Vinatieri nails a 48-yard field goal to give New England the amazing 20-17 victory. Much like they did in their 2 regular season losses, the Rams' high-scoring attack was shut down by an inability to hold on to the ball. The Bucs beat them that way. 14-point underdogs picked for the last in their division at the beginning of the season, overcame all odds, and win Super Bowl 36, 20-17.
The Bucs were also trying to sign up Jets offensive line coach Joe Muir, considered one of the league's best. The obvious question is, why would Weiss want to leave the Patriots? The answer, money. He is essentially a free agent, and the Bucs would throw a huge amount of cash at old Charlie to make this whole deal work. After all, they would be saving big money in the hiring of Marvin Lewis compared to what they offered Bill Parcells. Weiss led the Patriots offense to a league ranking below the in the lower half, let's say. Now, the St. Pete Times reporting today that the Glazers and McKay met Friday in New Orleans. The Glazers still want Rich to pursue Raiders coach John Gruden. The Glazers are still concerned about turning the Bucs offense around, and they need to see a rock-solid plan in place to upgrade the offensive staff before they will sign off on the defensive-minded Lewis as the head coach. Interesting stuff. Mark Royals, we put it to you. What do you know about Marvin Lewis, and how might he be received in the Bucs locker room?
Well, I think, first of all, he's a great defensive mind, and I think the concern here for a lot of fans is the offensive side of the ball, obviously. But I was with the Pittsburgh Steelers when he was a linebackers coach, a very fiery coach. He gets after you. He lets you know exactly what he wants, and he's not afraid to let you know when you mess up. My guess would be he's going to come here and be the head coach. I would have to assume that he's got a plan in place to put together a formidable offensive staff. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in consideration for this job. That's just the way I see it.
Now, the word is that Rich McKay and Marvin Lewis met for 5 hours and that Marvin was very impressive. And from what you're telling me, a fiery type of guy, which, in my own personal opinion, maybe someone the Bucs need as kind of an answer to what Tony was doing. That seems to be a good fit for this team right now.
Certainly, and he's a guy that's not afraid to get in your face. Like I said, when things are, watch him on the sidelines during the course of games when he's with the Ravens, and he gets upset about things, and he lets the people know exactly how he feels, the opposite of the way Coach Dungy did. And a lot of people feel like that was something that's missing here, somebody to light a fire under certain players, and maybe he's that guy.
Now, a lot of fans feel and a lot of critics feel that obviously the Bucs need to go with an offensive mind, a Gruden or a Norv Turner, who obviously is out there. Now, with Gruden, there's so much to deal with in terms of getting him an Al Davis, and I think that's pretty much become a moot point for the Bucs right now because, according to the Times report anyway, they can't get any calls back from the Raiders. But people will obviously say, why bring a defensive coach in? What's the reason behind that? And you're basically saying that if he brings in a good offensive staff, that really doesn't matter.
And it really doesn't. I think it was shown today that a good defensive team can win you a championship.
2 years in a row, we've seen that.
Exactly, and that's the way we play ball. That's the cornerstone of our team is our defense. And you would have to think that in order for him to be hired here, the plan of the offensive staff has to be put into place, and it's been something that's intriguing or acceptable by Rich McKay and the Glaciers, or you'd have to think he's not in the running for this job.
Last question, Mark. All this chaos, fiasco, if you will, that has been around the Bucs and this coaching search, how has it affected the players? What does it mean to you guys? Is it going to matter next year?
You know what? I really don't think it's going to matter that much. I think a lot of people were disappointed in the way things went down with Coach Dungy, but that's behind us now. And the fact is that we don't lose sight of that we're a good team, and we're close to being in the running for a championship. And we all feel confident that whoever Rich McKay and the Glaciers decide to be our next head coach, we'll play hard for him, we'll be a great team, and that's the way we're looking at it. We're not going to look at it as a setback at all.
All right, Mark Wells, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, JP.
The man who predicted the field goal tonight, winning for the Patriots. Unbelievable. I wish you would have told me that a lot earlier. Might have saved me. When we come back, some great golf today. Palm Harbor's Dave Overton had the lead in today's final round of the senior event. And it's Pebble Beach.
With the Bucs this week. Rich McKay said the search for a head coach might not end until after the Super Bowl. Well, it's after the Super Bowl. And according to a couple of reports, McKay likes the Ravens defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis. However, the Times reported, I'm sure you saw that today, that Bucs ownership doesn't like Marvin Lewis. They still want John Gruden. Now, if Rich McKay gets permission to talk to Gruden, Al Davis is just going to try to hold up the Bucs. He wants players, draft picks, cash, maybe all three. Now, Lewis, as you know, is an awful lot like Tony Dungy, a good defensive reputation, but no one really knows his offensive philosophy. And if McKay likes him, but the Glazers don't, well, what happens then? My advice right now, simply stay tuned. Something other than the job, CNN SI reports that Rich McKay and Lewis spent the day trying to firm up staffing, especially on the offensive side. And sources from the Ravens in Baltimore tell me they think that Lewis is gone. What McKay would like to do is have the whole package in place when he introduces Marvin Lewis because he knows there will be a backlash hiring a defensive coach, and all the problems have been on the offensive side of the ball for the last 3 years.
But a call from the phone company. St. Petersburg Times says the Bucs made at least 6 long-distance dial-ups to Davis, and not one was returned. Joel and Brian Glazer, the team's vice presidents, want John Gruden as head coach. Rich McKay, the team's GM, apparently wants Marvin Lewis. Maybe the Glazers should call McKay. Chris Mortensen says Steelers offensive coordinator Mike Mularkey and Norv Turner remain in the mix, and that the Rams coordinator Lovie Smith and the Pats offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss may get some consideration. Discussions on a long-term deal for the Bears coach Dick Geron.
Or whatever the heck it is, this just in, according to Don Banks of CNN SI, Rich McKay is absolutely, totally committed to hiring Marvin Lewis as the new head coach of the Bucs. And what's in the way of that happening? Start with the Twin Towers of Truth, Brian and Joel Glazer, who have already taken more shots than Rocky Balboa in the opening 10 minutes of Rocky 1.
toss in the question of what happens to Monty Kiffin, the current Bucs defensive coordinator, stir in the question of Rod Marinelli, who is ready to leave as the Bucs defensive line coach to rejoin Tony Dungy with the Colts. And if that's not enough, exactly who is that Lewis is going to hire to run the Bucs offense? Got it? Most reports leading out of New Orleans the last few days seem to indicate a Rich McKay preference to this man, Marvin Lewis, but none of us has talked to or been able to quote McKay, and until he either confirms it or denies it, I'm just going to be another bobblehead doll in the bobblehead world we live in. Hiring Lewis is merely one part of a complicated puzzle. If he's coming, does that mean Kiffin is leaving? If Lewis is the man, and according to some reports, the Glazers are not enthused about this choice, then exactly who is it who is going to run the offense? At this point, more questions than answers. Now the Super Bowl.
Nest in Oakland. It appears they are ready to hire Ravens defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis. Sources close to the Oakland Raiders are saying that the Bucs will have to give up 3 draft picks over 3 years to get Gruden. And while the Bucs may believe that's too steep a price to pay, they have reportedly put together several packages to present to Al Davis. Marvin Lewis, in the meantime, appears to be the Bucs ace in the hole here. In fact, the deal is said to be ready to sign. The two sides are even discussing what the offensive staff will look like. Lewis wants Browns receivers coach Terry Robisky to run the offense. The Bucs brass reportedly wants the Patriots offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss. Lewis is being very cautiously optimistic tonight. He knows about the Gruden factor and said by telephone this evening he remembers what happened last year when he was all but announced as the Bills head coach, then ended up getting passed up for the job. Ooh, this thing could come down very soon. All right, on to the Lightning now.
Of acquiring head coach John Gruden. The Bucs have reportedly imposed a deadline of tomorrow to make a deal. Other reports say the Raiders might want to stretch that out through the week. A source close to Gruden says that in December, a contract extension was on the table with a $4 million bonus. Then the Raiders lost 3 games, and Davis ripped up that deal. Gruden's agent then said the head coach would never sign another contract with the owner. Oakland players are very outspoken about wanting John Gruden to stay. The San Francisco Chronicle reports Gruden might even be persuaded to remain with the Raiders past the expiration of his contract. That's after next year. Oakland senior executive Bruce Allen tells a number of sources the Raiders are not talking with the Bucs, but a source inside the Raiders organization tells us no one but Al Davis knows what's going on. One Bucs candidate definitely out of the running, Norv Turner. He accepted the offensive coordinator position with Miami. If a Gruden deal does not fly, the Bucs are expected to name Ravens defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis the next head coach, but Baltimore, too, is becoming impatient with this process.
Equal to the one the Jets gave the Patriots for Bill Parcells, that being 4 draft picks, including a number 1 and 2. Sources have told Mort a Wednesday deadline's been set, with the Bucs ready to move on to Marvin Lewis should the deadline pass, Stuart.
Thinking by Friday at the outside latest, and it could happen as soon as tomorrow. Whether it's John Gruden or whether it's Marvin Lewis, the Bucs are moving forward with their plan to improve their offensive coaching staff. 28 Tampa Bay Sports has learned tonight the Bucs have hired Bill Muir to be their next offensive line coach. He is very well thought of in NFL circles. He comes to the Bucs from the New York Jets. In the meantime, the Bucs have given the Oakland Raiders a deadline of tomorrow to accept or reject one of their trade offers to wrestle away head coach John Gruden. ESPN is reporting tonight the offers are equal to or greater than the deal the Jets struck with the Patriots back in '97 to get Bill Parcells. The Jets gave up first, second, third, and fourth round draft picks over 3 years. Players from both the Bucs and the Raiders have arrived now in Hawaii for the Pro Bowl on Sunday. Bucs players are confident they're going to get a coach, while the Raiders feel confident they're going to keep a coach.
He's been pretty honest with me and straightforward, and I know he wants to come back and coach us. And, you know, I think that he's got some concerns as well, though, and hopefully they'll be addressed.
Gruden, I had an opportunity to meet him last year at the Pro Bowl. It's a guy who loves football, and that's what I love, and I think that'd be a nice fit.
Before I left, I did talk to Gruden, and I talked to Bruce, I've talked to Al, I've talked to everybody, and everybody pretty much assured me that 2002 was not in question.
All right, so we'll have to wait and see. Norv Turner is officially out of the mix. He was...
Gruden is dead in the water. The new head coach for the Buccaneers is going to be Marvin Lewis. Now, Rich McKay is not saying anything about the deal.
He has told everyone involved not to say a word. But I talked with Marvin Lewis's agent, Ray Anderson, about 35 minutes ago, who told me he expected things to happen by tomorrow.
Have you been able to talk with, or have you talked with Rich McKay at all, or when was the last time you spoke with Rich McKay?
Well, I'm not getting in all that. What I can tell you is that we're going to hold the line and see what happens with Marvin in the next 24 hours, and we're hoping that, in fact, he'll get a chance to be seriously frontline considered for that position. We're optimistic about that. That's where I have to leave it.
Okay, the Washington Post had him talking about their defensive coordinator position over there, and he's got to put his staff together. But I'm just wondering, in terms of an overall timeline with all of this happening, when you take all the other factors in, how patient can Marvin be?
I would say we're going to hold the line another 24 hours, and a definitive decision, one way or another, will be made within 24 hours because of those things you mentioned.
And I'll tell you what, that's agent speak. You'd expect the definitive decision to be the Bucs are going to hire Marvin Lewis as their new head coach. The official announcement may not come until tomorrow or later, because sources in Baltimore, sources close to Lewis, tell me that McKay wants to have the entire offensive staff in place. And the word I am getting right now is that Lewis's offensive coordinator will be Charlie Weiss. The Patriots' offensive coordinator will take the same job here with Lewis in Tampa. So John Gruden is done. Marvin Lewis is the new head coach.
Don't know the difference anyway. No, I'm going to tell you what I know, and it's not much, but this is what I'm going to tell you. Okay. Everyone has been chasing the John Gruden story today, certain that Rich McKay was trying to close a deal to pry Gruden out of Oakland. And yet, late tonight, NFL writer for CNNSI.com, Don Banks, is reporting that 2 league sources have told him the guy is Marvin Lewis, and he will close the deal with McKay tomorrow. Here's where it gets interesting. Lewis's agent seemed to indicate the very same thing without responding directly to the question. Ray Anderson said his client expects to know something tomorrow. If that's the case, then Rich McKay comes out the big winner here. He survived the threat from Bill Parcells, and he was able to avoid hiring the guy the Glazers really wanted to hire, meaning Gruden. In effect, then, McKay's future as this team's general manager is now squarely on the line. It occurs to me how sad it's going to be, on the one hand, if Marvin Lewis is the man, because for many Bucs fans, he is not going to be seen as a welcome choice, and that's certainly not fair to him. When this is announced, Rich McKay is going to be asked as many questions about why didn't you get Gruden as he will be asked about Lewis. And there's only one party to blame for that, and those are the guys who own this franchise. Instead of being excited about the future, the fans are going to remain angry about the past. Nice job, guys. Now to South Florida.
It really is, but we think now that we have some resolution. Al Davis is being Al Davis. Reportedly, the Bucs and the Raiders never came close to striking a deal to get John Gruden. So, Sports Illustrated, Scott Banks is reporting tonight that not only is the Raiders deal off, Marvin Lewis will be the next head coach of the Buccaneers. However, Marvin Lewis said by telephone within the past hour, that's news to him, and that right now, there's no offer on the table. That could change. In fact, we have confirmed from a very reliable source in Baltimore tonight that the Bucs spoke with Lewis today, and they have requested a face-to-face meeting at an undisclosed location tomorrow. Lewis, in fact, confirmed that for us tonight. You can read between the lines here, folks. The Bucs would never request a meeting with Lewis unless they plan to make him an offer. According to Lewis's agent, Ray Anderson, who, by the way, also represents Tony Dungy, said he and his client feel, quote, very confident tonight, end quote. It's expected the deal to hire Lewis will be finalized tomorrow, but the Bucs may not make it official until Lewis completes his coaching staff, and that could possibly drag into early next week. What a roller coaster. All right, today was National Signing Day.
That Ravens defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis will meet with the Malcolm Glazer family this evening. The two sides will work to finalize a contract in time for an announcement on Monday that Lewis is the new head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Mortensen also reports that former University of Indiana coach and Washington Redskins assistant Cam Cameron is the leading candidate to become the Bucs' new offensive coordinator. Should the news break tonight, of course, you'll hear about it here on the ESPN News Network. Lewis, regarded as one of the NFL's top defensive minds. Under his stewardship, Baltimore's defense set a record in 2000 for the fewest points allowed in a 16-game season.
he will certainly be missed, according to his players.
Talking to Ray Lewis today, you do hear that Ray Lewis describe Marvin Lewis as a very intense coach and an in-your-face coach. In fact, Ray Lewis said that, and this was one of the requirements that Rich McKay wanted to look for, was a guy who could handle veteran, diverse personalities, i.e. egos, which the Buccaneers clearly have, and the Ravens have, and that Marvin Lewis did a terrific job doing that.
Under Marvin Lewis, the Ravens have had the best defense in the NFL over the past 3 seasons, allowing the fewest points, rushing yards, total yards, yards per carry, and recording the most shutouts in the NFL. More NFL news and notes
for head coach, and that is Marvin Lewis. Chris Field joins us now. What's the story now?
Well, the Glazer sons meet Marvin Lewis for dinner tonight. Rather than bring Marvin Lewis to Tampa, Joel and Brian Glazer travel to the Baltimore area tonight to put their stamp of approval on the Bucs' 7th head coach. The Ravens defensive coordinator has never held the head coaching position. Tampa Bay is the 3rd organization to interview Lewis for a main job. Just last Saturday, the Glazers told Rich McKay to go after John Gruden when McKay decided on Marvin Lewis. Kevin O'Donnell talked with Lewis's agent on the phone tonight, Ray Anderson, about the dinner meeting.
Was it just the Glazers needed to get comfortable with Marvin?
And vice versa, so that it was important that the owners and the prospective coach meet, are getting a chance to meet, and that's what is occurring today, and we'll address the next phase of it tomorrow.
This could be a done deal by the weekend. Coming up in sports, we'll have more on this and bring you up to speed on the Bucs' offensive coordinator choices should Lewis be hired.
Which is very important. Okay.
Harper joins us now. Jay, Rich McKay did not meet with Marvin Lewis as we thought he was going to do, but there was a meeting.
There was a meeting. It happened tonight. Rich McKay couldn't make the trip because of a scheduling conflict. So instead, Brian and Joel Glazer flew to Baltimore today to speak face-to-face with the man they want to become their next head coach. Brian and Joel met with Lewis for several hours tonight. The meeting began around 7:30, and basically the main reason for it was for the Glazers to address several concerns that Lewis has at this point. Primarily, the way the assistant coaches are going to be selected and the whole John Gruden deal. Lewis knows Gruden was the Glazers' choice, and he knows that Gruden will be available after next season, so he wants reassurance that he will not be a rent-a-coach here for 1 year until the guy that they really want becomes available. As for Lewis's coaching style, it's a little different from Tony Dungy's. He's much more intense, for starters, and his players really respond to him.
I don't think Marvin wants to work hard. I said, if you work hard, you can do anything you want to do. You can play to any level you want to play at. But one thing about it, he can definitely come in and help his program.
This whole deal's been kind of crazy. I've stopped listening to who our coach is going to be. In fact, I'm looking for one down at the beach here. But you know, if it's Marvin, we had the opportunity this week to talk to some guys like Rod Whitson, and they don't want to lose him, and they think he'd be a tremendous fit for us.
Our team coverage of the search for a new coach continues now with 28 Tampa Bay's Bob Kendrick. He's live at Raymond James Stadium. Bob, both you and I had a chance to talk with a lot of fans tonight.
We sure did, Jay. You know, I think we have further proof that the Bucs right now are the buzz of Tampa Bay. Tonight, 100 members of the Associated Builders and Contractors, many of whom helped build Raymond James Stadium, met. And over the past couple of months, as you can imagine, they have been talking a lot in their various offices about the Bucs' future and the search for the head coach and the like. They wanted some answers, and they knew just the speaker that could give it to them.
Everywhere I go, everybody wants to talk about the head coach.
Jay Crawford may be encyclopedic about sports, but these days, the Bucs chapter is all anyone seems to care about.
What I want to know is what happens with Keyshawn Johnson.
Bucs chat is hot these days, so who better to bring to your banquet than someone with his finger on their pulse?
Usually, before you fire a coach, you have a pretty good idea of who you want to hire.
How do you think the Bucs have handled all this since the end of the season?
Horribly. Horribly. I mean, none of us know what's going on.
And I think the Glazers knew who they wanted to hire. Their mistake was they didn't know a thing in the world about Bill Parcells.
Now, these ladies here are in the National Association of Women in Construction. They're used to building a lot of things. If you were in the Glazers family right now, what would you be telling them around the dinner table?
Whatever it takes, get Gruden here.
Seems only right in this crazy saga that Jay would be interrupted for breaking news.
This just in. The Glazers were in Baltimore today. to talk to Marvin Lewis, and that's a huge development.
One that may be met with many groans. But these are builders. They're not ready to demolish the Bucs yet.
We got to support him and, you know, fill that stadium like we always do.
All right, well, I talked with a few of the fans tonight, actually many of them at the meeting, and asked them basically on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your level of enthusiasm for hiring Marvin Lewis? And almost all of them said 8 or 9. They're at this point still optimistic and willing to give his defensive mind a chance. But, of course, they may have no other option at this point. Jay, nice job tonight. Back to you now.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. It's a done deal, all but a done deal. I mean, Marvin Lewis's agent, Ray Anderson, said tonight, Marvin is their choice. Just crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and perhaps tomorrow, we're hearing that the Bucs will hold off until Monday for the news conference because they want all of his assistant coaches to be in place by that time. So the deal should be signed, sealed, delivered tomorrow. At Monday, they'll announce it.
And then your speaking career is over, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so. I'm off the circuit.
Nice touch. Cell phone in the middle of a speech. That's
hey,
nice.
breaking news.
28 Tampa Bay.
This is just the way this thing went down. It's kind of crazy.
Really? You won't know until next fall.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to have to wait until the season to see what this guy has. Here's a quote directly from Lewis's agent, Ray Anderson. Marvin is the choice, end quote. Even though the two sides do not have a signed contract yet, Lewis will become the Bucs' 7th head coach, perhaps as early as tomorrow. The Bucs will introduce him at a news conference on Monday. Lewis met for several hours tonight with Brian and Joel Glazer. The meeting took place in Baltimore, and the two sides discussed a variety of issues. Lewis has concerns about how the coaching staff is going to be put together, and he should. This is a big deal. Plus, he wants to make sure the Glazers have no intentions of trying to hire John Gruden after next season when his contract with the Raiders expires. Lewis's agent is saying tonight there's no hitches that could hold up this deal. It's just a matter of now of tying up loose ends. Marvin has a reputation for being a disciplinarian. Rondé Barber talked about Lewis today from the Pro Bowl.
They run their deal the way they run it up in Baltimore, and we're used to the way doing it in Tampa. It'll be interesting to see how those things meld together. I'm sure he wouldn't be too hard on us if he comes there.
At this point, I'm just over here having fun in the Pro Bowl. I'll let them handle it over there. When I get back, then we'll, you know, you'll know more about it. We had too many different personality egos in our camp. So if he can deal with our personalities, he can deal with anybody's personality.
All right, Lewis is 43 years old. This will be his first head coaching job at any level. But his defensive numbers are pretty hard to ignore. Very solid over the past few years. Each of the last 3, the Ravens' defense has been ranked #2 in the NFL. And 2 years ago, look at that stat on the far right. The Ravens' defense allowed just 10.6 points per game. That is an NFL record. Oh, let's hope he brings that to Tampa. Now, CNNSI is reporting that Lewis's offensive coordinator will be former Indiana head coach Cam Cameron. He was fired after last season with the Hoosiers, but he does have experience in the NFL. He was Norv Turner's quarterback coach with the Redskins. All right, on to...
Right now is who is going to conduct the search for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because Rich McKay, the general manager, the highly respected executive, will probably resign within the next 48 to 72 hours. That's what Buccaneers players expect here. That's what league officials expect here. So this is now officially a Glazer family production. Where are they going to look? The college ranks they're going to look a little bit harder at, but I've also been told that if they call Bob Kraft, the Patriots owner, Kraft would probably give him a strong endorsement on Charlie Weiss, the offensive coordinator of the Patriots, that they're looking for the offensive side of the ball. But I've told they start from scratch here, and I think it means they start without Rich McKay, too.
The Bucs, my God, what's happened here? You know what? I'm going to conduct the search, okay? Can I do it?
You would do better.
Well,
they had a good coach. Marvin Lewis told him he's out.
But the first name on the list is not coming back in this picture. Is that what you're saying?
Bill Parcells is not in this picture right now.
That's a lot of people are thinking, but that's not.
What do you think about the Bucs situation, including the Bucs who were at the game?
Or the Raiders who were at the game.
And any rumor flies. I saw John Lynch before the game, and I said, John, have you heard the latest? He says, what? I said, Buddy Ryan. He says, no. I said, I'm just making it up, you know.
Number 65, offense, 5 yards, repeat first down.
They get Ron Stone for jumping off sides, but you know the rumors. It's hard to figure out what is exactly the truth and what is not. But the one thing is, it does affect John Lynch, Keyshawn Johnson, and the rest of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I talked to Rich Gannon before the game, and he says he doesn't know what's going on in Oakland.
Eric's going to talk to John Lynch in just a moment on 1st down and 15. And this is Green up to the 35-yard line. All right, ED, what can you find out here?
Well, I'm here with John Lynch of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. John, now tell me, what's going on with the hiring of a new head coach down in Tampa?
You want to coach?
I don't think you want me as a coach.
But it's been a soap opera over here. You know, it looked like, you know, obviously the Parcells situation in the beginning, and then, you know, everything we were hearing was that Marvin Lewis was going to be the guy, and something happened along the lines, and it's a little unsettling right now, to be honest. And, you know, would like to be here relaxing, but, you know, a lot of people's livelihoods are at stake, so hopefully we'll get that situation taken care of.
How frustrating is it, though?
It's frustrating. You know, you feel like you got it so close to being right there, and now all of a sudden, you know, it's just everything's up in arms. And, you know, you got confidence. The good thing is that the Glazer families, I think their motivation is right in doing it to try to win a championship. And whether you agree with everything that they're doing, that's what they're doing it for.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Thanks,
all right. Al?
All right, thank you, Eric. And Marvin Lewis deal appeared to have been done a couple of days ago. Now the latest is that Marvin Lewis is, I believe, going to meet with the Washington Redskins about the possibility of becoming the defensive coordinator there under new coach Steve Spurrier.
And Tampa's general manager Richie McKay, you got to be wondering about his future.
3rd and 3, and this is Owens, and he does not make the catch.
Yo, I'm trying to figure it out too.
Are you disappointed you don't have a coach yet?
No, I have a coach. My coach is Andy Reid.
If you could get Gruden, how do you feel about that deal?
They just got to get the best guy available, and right now he's not available, so we'll see what happens. I'm giving you all those.
You give me all of them.
That's right. I'm going to give it to you.
All right. Thanks, Keyshawn. Al?
All right. Thank you, Eric. On 3rd down and 5 now, it is Stewart handing the ball off to Larry Centers. And Centers takes it up to the 27-yard line. That's shy of down, and they'll stop the clock here. Will the NFC and get the ball back.
Keyshawn has a new book coming out. Just give me a damn coach.
Several Buccaneer players requesting anonymity have told me they expect Rich to resign. They also told me they don't want to play for the Glazers, and that after this circus of a hiring process, the Glazers should sell the team or face a mutiny by the players. Now, if McKay does leave, the Glazers would then have to find a GM and a head coach starting from scratch. That would be the worst possible scenario. Now, this was all precipitated by yesterday's snubbing of Marvin Lewis. McKay had basically assured Lewis he had the job. Rich thought he had the authority to do so. But after the Glazers met with Lewis, they would not sign off on the hire. McKay was so sure he had the authority, he had already been working on putting together a staff with Lewis and planning the press conference. The Glazers say McKay never had that authority. Ray Anderson is the agent for Marvin Lewis, and he told us the Glazers are fudging the truth again.
Talked to Rich McKay. There was no question whatsoever that Marvin Lewis was their choice. We were moving toward formalizing a contract. We were to complete Marvin's deal today, the assistant coaches this weekend, with the plan to have a grand press conference with Marvin Lewis and his key assistants on Monday. That is something that the Bucs know very well.
As well, if Rich McKay decides he can no longer work for the Glazers after the brothers called off his deal with Marvin Lewis. A current Hall of Fame coach has been trying to offer his services to the Bucs for one season. 76-year-old Marv Levy, the former Buffalo coach, wants to coach next season, then step aside for the Glazers to bring in John Gruden. Bucs officials say his offer probably won't be accepted. Bucs players keep up with the coaching saga in Hawaii. Keyshawn Johnson, Mike Allstott, Rondé Barber, and John Lynch make the trip. Lynch brings along DJ Krause, a special guest from St. Pete. DJ belongs to the Lynch Foundation battling cancer.
He's saying, all my children, what have they done? Little did we know at that time, huh?
So, Al, you know, it seems like the Glazer boys are calling the shots now.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, but who knows what's going to happen from here? Who knows how this affects Rich McKay?
I was going to say, yeah, Rich, what happens? Is he out in the cold?
Well, you know what? Right now, this from the No News is Good News department. The Buccaneers plan to take a timeout over the weekend. They'll continue their coaching search on Monday, and as of tonight, nobody, and I repeat, nobody, including the Buccaneers, knows which way this will turn. But there is a man with a plan. How about Hall of Fame coach Marv Levy? He's now 76. He says he wouldn't mind being a one-year coach and getting the Bucs into the John Gruden sweepstakes. As you know, Levy took Buffalo to 4 Super Bowls. Highly organized, good offensive mind, But a source within the Buccaneers has said, don't hold your breath. In the meantime, this Buccaneer mess has been a major topic at the Pro Bowl in Hawaii. Listen to John Lynch.
Proper over here, you know, it looked like, you know, obviously the Parcells situation in the beginning, and then, you know, everything we were hearing was that Marvin Lewis was going to be the guy, and something happened along the lines, and it's a little unsettling right now, to be honest, and, you know, would like to be here relaxing, but, you know, a lot of people's livelihoods are at stake, so hopefully we'll get that situation taken care of.
Obviously, we'll have more on the Pro Bowl and more on this situation coming up in sports. The other big question is, where does Rich McKay fit in all this? Will he stay after this Marvin Lewis situation put him in a very difficult situation?
I got my folks and my friends calling me from the D.C., Baltimore area laughing at me, saying, when are you guys going to get a coach?
A lot of football fans around the country are laughing right now, but, you know, the Glazers feel very strongly about this. Right. If they win their first game, they think, you know, the laughing will stop.
And they're the owners, and they can make that sort of decision.
It's their team. They paid $109 back at it Monday. The question is, where will Rich McKay fit into the search? The Glazers turned down McKay's choice. Marvin Lewis, very messy, even more embarrassing. Will McKay still be the point man? And will any candidate take him seriously now that the Glazers cut off his legs in the Marvin Lewis talks? Who knows where the Buccaneers will turn now? Will they try to rekindle deals for John Gruden or Bill Parcells? Some believe that Monty Kiffin is a possibility. Others don't. Marv Levy has said he'll take it for a year. The Buccaneers may not be open to that. Well, there's Vikings coach Dennis Green as well, and several college possibilities, but it has made for embarrassing times for Buccaneer All-Stars at the Pro Bowl.
Second down and 7.
He's definitely gone. We begin with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Rick Dudley has stepped down. It had been a swap meet during his years with the Lightning. Among his top deals, trading for all-star goalie Nikolai Habibulin. Dudley is said to be very frustrated with the tight budget. The Lightning did not make the playoffs under Dudley. Assistant GM Jay Feaster will take over for now. Now, Dudley will stay on as a senior advisor. Now, what about Rich McKay? Will he join Dudley in leaving? Reports all over the NFL saying that McKay could leave the Buccaneers as early as tomorrow. McKay's still unhappy with the Glazers making him stop contract talks with his choice to replace Tony Dungy, Baltimore's Marvin Lewis. As it was, McKay was stuck with cleaning up the Bill Parcells mess and the firing of Tony Dungy. And as we've seen for weeks, who really knows what'll happen here? But what is ironic, you know, it wasn't that long ago that the Buccaneers were considered to be a model franchise. McKay and Dungy worked very well together. They built a franchise that made 4 playoff appearances, and now football fans all over the country are laughing. We'll have much more coming up in sports and, of course, the Sports Zone.
Sure, it's like a game just unraveling. You know, you just... Fourth quarter, all of a sudden.
As tomorrow. By now, you know the story. McKay was key in building this franchise, but the Glazers went over his head to work a deal with Bill Parcells, and then the Glazers and the Bucs got burned. McKay had to clean that up. And Friday, he was talking contract with his choice to replace Tony Dungy, Marvin Lewis. And the Glazers told him Lewis would not be their man. Well, McKay has 1 year remaining on his contract. He would be a prize for any NFL team. And chances are the Buccaneers would demand compensation if McKay left for another team. All right, now to action on the floor. The best basketball players on earth. Meltdown for the Tampa Bay. May walk away from the Buccaneers as early as tomorrow. Here is the latest. It's been an incredible roller coaster ride for McKay. Friday, the Glazers made him end contract talks with his choice for the Bucs head coaching job, Baltimore's Marvin Lewis. That as McKay was cleaning up that Bill Parcells mess and the firing of Tony Dungy. Now, McKay has been the Buccaneer GM for 7 years. He has drafted, he has signed, he has re-signed literally every player and coach on this team. And the Bucs have made the playoffs 4 times in his 7 years. And Marvin Lewis will have a new job after all. The Redskins have thrown a mega contract at the Ravens' defensive boss. 3 years with incentives that could pay him more than $1 million per year. Easily the biggest deal for any assistant coach in football. While Steve Spurrier...
Number 2, they fired Dungy specifically so they could hire Bill Parcells, when in the end, Parcells wasn't interested. Oh, yeah, and in that process, they actually interviewed Parcells' hand-picked guy for the team's new general manager when they still had one in Rich McKay. Then, to show Rich they still love him, They actually let him head up the real search for the next head coach. Rich did, and he recommended this man, Marvin Lewis. The Glazers told him, not so fast, Richie. Go try one more time to get John Gruden. Rich did. It fell through, and again, he said, Marvin Lewis is your guy. Then, after the world's longest face-to-face meeting between owners and a prospective coach, 5 hours worth of talk, the Glazers finally decided they weren't comfortable with Lewis. After 5 hours in a room with the Glazers, I bet Lewis wasn't real comfortable with them either. The trail of mistakes isn't over, though, because the process continues. Who knows what they'll do next to embarrass the Bucs? I keep going back to that fateful day when the Glazers bought the Buccaneers. Listen.
We're not going to be running the football operation. We are not football people. We have good people running the operation. Our job is to get involved in the community, to get the people to get to know us, to get tickets sold, to put people in the stands, and get the place going crazy.
Why couldn't they just let Rich McKay do his job?
And he has done a very good job of that, believe me, even through this situation. Keep it right here on ABC 28. We'll continue to give you the very best in coverage on the soap opera that is, right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Let's just hope they can get this thing resolved for all our sakes. We've been on the phones. We've been talking to people out in the streets. Enough already. Let's go.
And this area deserves...
Joel and Ed Glazer met with Ralph Friesen last night in Maryland. This morning, the Terrapins head coach announced he's staying with his college team. The Glazers never offered Friesen the job. They never had the chance. A couple other potential candidates downplay their potential. As we told you at the top of the 10 o'clock news, Washington's Rick Neuheisel says he has not been contacted by the Glazers and does not expect to be. Coach Neuheisel responds to the possible Bucs interest from this benefit in Birmingham.
No designs, no goals in mind that would take me elsewhere. Now, you never say never, but ultimately, you try to make do with what you've got, and I've got a great deal. Washington has been wonderful to me, and I'm excited about playing next year.
Another candidate, Oregon's Mike Bellotti, also laughed when asked if he'd been contacted by the Bucs. He says he doesn't expect to be, and he's happy out west. A source close to Bellotti says if anything comes of this, it would be a surprise, especially because of the Bucs.
Any second. Bucs insiders tell me tonight that he knows of the Glazers have no interviews set up right now. Bob Stoops out of Oklahoma is a possibility along with several other guys, but nothing is set up right now. Well, it's been 4 weeks to the day since the Glazers canned Tony Dungy. 4 weeks, and not only are they no closer to hiring his replacement, they've never been further away. We do know the Glazer brothers interviewed Maryland coach Ralph Friesen. That happened last night. This morning, Friesen told the Glazers he wasn't interested. He told the media trust is a huge issue with him, and he has it with Maryland. He didn't know what he'd have here. There is growing sentiment out there that the Bucs are unstable because of this month-long debacle. We asked Bucs players rep Mark Royals how it's affecting them.
Well, there's definitely a concern with all the different dates that are coming up with the draft and free agency and all those kind of things. You'd certainly wonder if not having someone in place at this point is going to be a problem. Hopefully that won't be, but the decision is out of the players' hands, basically. All we can do is play when training camp rolls around, so whatever.
$545 million sale was completed just 2 days ago to Arthur Blank. Atlanta has permission to interview McKay, but not to negotiate hiring him. The Glazers would likely demand compensation from the Falcons for the rights to Rich McKay. The Bucs search for the next head coach now goes west. Fox 13 Sports has learned the Bucs have requested permission to talk with Oregon State.
Be wondering.
Good point here. As you heard, only at 6 o'clock right here on 28 Tampa Bay Sports. Buccaneers general manager Rich McKay spent today in Atlanta talking to the Falcons. So the Buccaneers are staring at replacing a head coach, a coaching staff, and maybe a GM. Now, McKay returned to Tampa tonight. He would not comment. Now, McKay spent yesterday afternoon talking with the Glazers, their first real meeting since the owners forced McKay to end contract talks with his choice for the head coaching job, Marvin Lewis. Well, yesterday they called it a very good meeting. They'll meet again later this week. Could it be a negotiation to set McKay free? And what kind of compensation would the Glazers demand to let McKay become the Falcons GM? Also reports tonight that the Glazers are continuing their coaching search among
I know this, he's got a lot of pride, like his daddy. He's super smart. He's a good football guy. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a little story. I babysit Richie when I was coaching at SC. I used to take him down to eat pie. So me and him be good buddies. But he is a very talented guy, and hopefully they get things ironed out there. And I think right now, as far as I know, he's pretty much the guy calling the shots. So hopefully it will wind up that way.
All right, now as for Terry Bradshaw, it was a much different idea from Terry. As we heard earlier, he thinks the Glazers' handling of this entire situation is nothing more than a huge joke, including their treatment of Rich McKay. Here's what Terry Bradshaw thinks Rich should do next.
If your owner is going over your head and you're the general manager, you need to move on.
So that's
because that's your job. What do the Glazers know about football coaches?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't make their money in football. What'd they make it in?
Restaurants and mobile homes.
There you go. And mobile homes don't stay put, do they? They move around, brother.
Well, there you go.
Because the Bucs will also discuss the general manager position with Mariucci. Steve Mariucci has 2 years left on his 49ers contract. The Bucs will have to compensate San Francisco if they hire Mariucci. Mariucci's 49ers are known for their explosive offense. Over 5 seasons with San Francisco, he has a 47-36 record, won 2 and lost 3 playoff games. The Bucs confirm Brian and Joel Glazer will meet with Steve Mariucci in the next couple of days. 49ers GM Terry Donahue describes his discussions with team owner Denise DeBartolo York and her husband John York.
Steve expressed to me that because of the magnitude of the job, because this is an enormous opportunity to be a general manager and head coach, he wanted to ask our permission, Denise and John's permission through me, to be able to visit with Joel Glazer about that.
So permission granted. If the Bucs give up draft picks to Steve Mariucci, to get Steve Mariucci, they could get them back from Atlanta if the Falcons hire current Bucs GM Rich McKay. Again, Brian and Joel Glazer will take time away from their planned family vacation out west to meet with 49ers head coach Steve Mariucci.
And that should happen in the next couple of days?
Over this weekend, and then a deal could be done early next week.
Okay.
And this could be a huge bird. Yeah. This could be one of the best birds they could ever imagine of getting. The Buccaneers are one step closer to getting a new coach and a new general manager all in one. The San Francisco 49ers have given the Bucs permission to speak to Steve Mariucci. You're talking the big name the Bucs were searching for. He's known for his offense. He's filled in as a GM for the Niners, and he's a choice that would certainly quiet the Buccaneer critics in a hurry. Word is, Mariucci's in the middle of a power struggle within the Niner organization. Imagine that. And he may be had for the right compensation. Now, the Niners say the only reason they would allow Mariucci to even talk to the Buccaneers is because this job is for a head coach and general manager. That obviously means that Rich McKay is close to a deal with Atlanta. We'll talk to the Niners about this decision coming up in sports.
You expect to hear something from Rich in the next maybe 24 hours?
I would think that this whole thing will be wrapped up, if this is the case, by early next week. All right. Well, we've heard this before.
Mariucci's got a cool nickname.
Mariucci to the Buccaneers. That may be the ultimate in turning chicken stuff into chicken salad. But after Parcells, Gruden, Marvin Lewis, and 4 others, you have to wonder, when will the other shoe drop? Mariucci is everything the Glazers want. He's a glamour choice. He's helped develop quarterbacks Brett Favre and Jeff Garcia. The Bucs would have to cough up compensation. Then again, Atlanta will have to cough up compensation to get Rich McKay. Here's what the Niners had to say.
We gave Steve permission to go and talk to Tampa Bay because this is an opportunity that's unique. If it had just been for a head coaching position, my own personal belief is that we would not have granted that permission.
Obviously, that means that McKay has decided to move on.
Mariucci, so what's going on now? Sportsman Chris Thomas?
It just never ends. No. It's amazing that one of the newest and committed to our community residents is who? Former San Francisco 49ers owner Eddie DeBartolo Jr. I wonder how he feels about the possibility of Mariucci not only becoming the Bucs' new head coach, but general manager as well. You know, if I were DeBartolo, it would be enough for me to try and buy the Bucs team. whatever. Mariucci still has 2 years left on his 49ers contract, which means 49ers management is going to want a hefty compensation from the Bucs in order to let him go. The key, however, is the clear understanding that the Glazers' interest in Mariucci extends beyond the sidelines. To sweeten the pot, the Glazers are offering the general manager's post as well.
If it had just been for a head coaching position, my own personal belief is that we would not have granted that permission. Steve has done an outstanding job here for us. We'd like him to stay as our coach. I think that Steve's success is going to cause this kind of reaction and interest from other people, both now and in the future.
Yeah, I guess the obvious conclusion here is this. If Mariucci is being offered the dual roles of coach and GM, then there's no need for Rich McKay to drive over to one Buck bunker anymore. And it's also time for the Glazers to do the honorable thing and thank Rich for his loyalty and wish him good luck in Atlanta. And then again, as we've learned the last 4 weeks, nothing is over until it's over. Gail?
I guess I'm a little confused, though, about like the San Francisco team even being willing to let him talk about a job with somebody else when he has 2 years left and he's done a great job for them.
12-4 last season. The problem here is that there are obvious problems between Bill Walsh, who's kind of like the resident guru icon of the 49ers organization and has a lot of input still into the structure of the team, and then the coach itself. And apparently the coach and Mariucci, or excuse me, the general manager and Mariucci are at some odds.
So that would explain it then.
Exactly.
All right, Chris, thanks.
The site.
$2:30, 3 o'clock, and we said all the right things. We've always had a good relationship, and I was proud of the fact that he came on so strong as a coach and as a charismatic character throughout the world or global. And but I felt if this is what he wanted to do, if he wanted to go home, we could live with it based on the compensation that they were giving to us. That is the story. About 8 o'clock this morning, Joel called me and said, how are we going to handle this from a press standpoint, an announcement standpoint? And I had already checked with Bruce. Bruce had given me some ideas. Ms. Trask gave me some ideas, and we were ready to do it. And I said, have you talked to Steve? And he said, I just got done talking to Steve and told him we're going to go in a different direction. And that is the story of John Gruden going to Tampa Bay. And John, Bruce did all the negotiations. I just want to make this point. A lot of people have used the word authority. John has never wanted authority over the personnel. John has hired all his own coaches other than 2. And when he first got here, we had a couple coaches from the old staff who were under contract, but the only 2 I've asked John to keep. And I've always said to him, if they don't fit what you want, we'll move them into other parts of our organization, and that's Fred Blitnikoff and Willie Brown. That is it. And Bruce can tell you about authorities and things like that, and then, of course, we'll answer questions or whatever you might want to talk about.
But as far as the authority issue, you know, those of you who know John pretty well, it really wasn't an issue because we were doing so well. And
well, there you heard it. Raiders owner Al Davis discussing the process by which John Gruden is leaving Oakland and now going to become the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a 5-year contract worth $17.5 million. We have an instant ESPN.com online poll question for you, and if we can bring that up. We want to know, did Tampa Bay give up too much for John Gruden? 2 first rounds, 2 second rounds over the course of the 2002, 2003, and 2004 drafts. 2 of those picks coming in this year's 2002 draft. So log on to ESPN.com and let us know what you think. We'll have your results in just a bit, plus all the day's top stories ahead on ESPN News.
Thanks, but no thanks, Steve Mariucci. The Bucs have decided to go with the guy across the bay. Finally, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a new head coach, John Gruden. ESPN's Sal Palantonio reports the 38-year-old former Raiders coach will get $17.5 million over 5 years with the Bucs. As compensation, Sal reports the Raiders will receive first and second round draft picks this year, a first round pick next year, and a second round pick in 2004. But no cash or current players will be involved. The Bucs finally get the high-profile offensive-minded coach they wanted since firing Tony Dungy on January 14th. Now, Gruden's 38 wins before the age of 40 are the 4th most by any head coach since 1960. Only Don Shula, John Madden, and Bill Cowher had more. But remember, Gruden still has a few years and a little time to catch up to these legends. Well, the Houston Texans began their expansion draft today, and the #1 pick is Tony Boselli, who allowed just 14.5 sacks in his 7-year career, but played in just 3
picks in this April's draft. A first-round pick in 2003 and a second-round pick in 2004. Also, $8 million in additional compensation to Oakland Raiders owner Al Davis. Now, for his part, John Gruden will get a 5-year contract worth $17.5 million.
Our team coverage of this story begins now with 28 Sports anchor Jay Crawford.
Jay, this is really kind of a major gamble for the Bucs that puts quite a bit of pressure on John Gruden to win, doesn't it?
Well, 4 draft picks and a total of about $25 million when you take into consideration the $8 million to Al Davis and then the $17 million to John Gruden over these 5 years. Yeah, there is pressure. I talked to John Gruden on the telephone tonight for about 10 minutes, and I'm telling you, he could not be any happier to be coming to Tampa Bay. And I'll have more on that in just a bit. Yeah, he's thrilled. 17 million reasons why he's thrilled. Let me take you through how this whole deal came together. And to do it, we really have to go back to yesterday. That's when the whole thing started. When the word out of California was basically that the Bucs' next head coach would be this guy, Steve Mariucci. He spent 6 hours in meetings with Brian, Joel, and even Malcolm Glazer. And in those meetings, the Bucs actually offered Steve the coaching job, and they offered him the job as the team's general manager. But at the end of the day, Mariucci just couldn't see giving up San Francisco Bay for Tampa Bay.
Sometimes you pick up and leave, and that's never been easy on a family. It never will be. And there's a lot of professions that pick up and leave and have to relocate, and coaching's one of them. But at this time in my life and my family's ages, it would have been extremely difficult to do that.
All right, now after the deal with Mariucci broke down, the Bucs were as desperate as ever. So Joel Glazer called this man, Oakland Raiders owner Al Davis, and basically he tried himself one final run at getting the man they wanted all along, and that, of course, was John Gruden. Now here is Al Davis telling the story of that phone conversation between himself and Joel Glazer. Listen.
Joel Glazer called me from the Regent Beverly Wilshire in Los Angeles. They were there for some thing with some function with their whole family. And he said, look, we're real close with Steve Mariucci. I want to make one more shot at John Gruden. I said, there are no more shots, Joel. I told you what it is. I don't want to negotiate. I don't want to bargain. He said, look, if we do this and that, it's about it, isn't it? I said, yeah, that's about it, isn't it? He said, well, will you take it up? Will you take a look at it? And this now is about 10:30. I said, okay, I'll talk to our people. And I said, but I've got to do one other thing first. I got to talk to John. John's going to make the decision.
And, you know, getting John to go along with it was the easy part of the deal. He wanted to come here all along. His parents live here. John told me tonight on the phone, this whole thing has been crazy. He can't even believe it himself that it's all come together. It's a done deal, and he's coming to the Buccaneers. He told me he's thrilled to be coming home, and he's really looking forward to Wednesday so he can get down here and get to work. Now, by looking at that video, you can tell Gruden's style is filled with intensity.
Absolutely. As you look at his record, I can tell you John is probably a direct opposite of Tony Dungy. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. He is a strict disciplinarian, but all of his players seem to love him, and he's definitely a rah-rah coach. He's not afraid to get out there and celebrate with his players. Gruden's combined one-loss record with the Raiders, 38 wins, 26 losses, and an even up 2-2 in the playoffs. Now, here's what Brian Glazer had to say about John Gruden. He called Gruden, quote, the finest young mind in the game. We took our time and got the man we really wanted, and we couldn't be more thrilled. This was one of the most important decisions in the history of the franchise, end quote. So now the big unanswered question is this. Who will be the Buccaneers' general manager? Al Keck is live at One Buc Place. Al, who is the boss here?
Well, as of right now, Rich McKay is still the general manager. We know it will not be John Gruden because he signed that $17.5 million deal here just to coach. Now, Rich McKay spent this morning anyway, here at One Buc Place. How much more time he will spend here is the big question. But if you listen to Al Davis, McKay is already history.
We went over the price again because he had never talked to me. It was always Rich McKay, and they had, by that time, taken Rich McKay out of the equation and actually fired him.
McKay fired? Well, the Buccaneers say that's news to them. They claim that as of tonight, he is still the general manager of this team. And they also say that the Glazers and McKay will meet later this week to decide his future with the team. The Atlanta Falcons would love to end up with McKay. The Buccaneers say the price tag is at least a first-round pick. Sound familiar? Oh, by the way, the Falcons own the 16th pick in April's draft. The Buccaneers traded the 21st pick to Oakland for John Gruden. Now, is there any chance McKay could end up staying?
There isn't a general manager now in place. John Gruden will be the head coach only. He only wants to be the coach. He's being paid as the head coach. But I think McKay is probably too far down the road with Atlanta. We'll have to wait and see about that.
One name that has popped up, if indeed McKay leaves for the Falcons, is, ironically, the former Falcons general manager, Ken Herrick. He could possibly become the Bucs general manager. He and Gruden are very close. Jay?
All right, Al Keck from One Buc Place, thank you. It would be very hard to imagine the Buccaneers without a McKay in the organization. They've never been there before. Now, I told you that John Gruden is a player's coach. The guys that have played with him think the world of him. We talked with Bucs players rep Mark Royals earlier tonight to get his take on John Gruden being named the Bucs' new head coach.
As players, we had to feel confident that a good coach would be named. Gruden has been a name that was in the news for a long time. He was obviously one of the first choices, and to get it wrapped up, I think everybody's probably breathing a collective sigh of relief right now.
Yeah, I think not only the players, but the fans, the Glazers, everybody involved. Ironically, tonight when I was on the phone with John, he said, please excuse me. I heard a lot of commotion in the background. He said, please excuse me. I'm babysitting my 3 boys right now, and it sounded like they were having a whale of a time in the background.
I'm sure they were.
The funny thing about John Gruden is he is a workaholic. He's known for his 18-hour days, and even though this is his off season, he said he can't wait to get down here and get this thing going.
That's great.
So he'll be here Wednesday.
A lot of pressure on him, just like we said at the beginning. I mean, somebody's paid $8 million to get you down here.
Yeah.
They've given up this and that and a big contract.
He's not afraid of it, though. He's ready to tackle it head on.
Thanks, Jay.
We'll have more in sports.
28 Tampa Bay News is just getting started, including more on the Bucs hiring of John Gruden.
Cricket Hooters on Hillsborough. You talk about a wing and a prayer. The former king of wings here may now be the answer to Bucs fans' prayers. And we're going to hear from family and former co-workers of John Gruden coming up.
And a little later, we'll show you why.
He's no stranger to the Bay Area, as you've heard. Our team coverage continues now with Bob Kendrick. He's live at the restaurant where John Gruden used to work for minimum wage several years ago. Bob, did you check and see if they had any openings for you?
You know what? It's quite a little career leap, isn't it, Marty? Strangely enough, they don't even have a picture of him on the wall here, but I'm sure they will now that he's the Bucs head coach. 17 years ago that John Gruden worked as a fry cook right back here at this popular Hooters, one that's still very popular with Bucs players to this day. And this really has got to seem like quite a full circle for him. His new office is going to be about a mile away from here, but it must seem like a world away. You could say John Gruden's gone from the frying pan into the fire, but those who worked with him that summer think he's just the man to take the heat as Bucs leader.
Fired up, yeah. I mean, from knowing the gentleman 15, 17 years ago, he's really accomplished a lot in his life. Respect that. But I respect the man. He brought the Raiders back.
I thought it was all lost. A couple of weeks ago, I thought it was over.
Gruden's father, Jim, wasn't just trying to sink putts at Eastlake Woodlands today. He was trying to let the big news sink in.
We're really happy because to have the kids come, 3,000 miles back near home is great. But I think he'll do a great job because he'll work as hard as anybody.
In the early 90s, younger brother Jay was the big Gruden in town, quarterbacking the Storm to Arena Football Championships. Now coaching Orlando, Jay's tickled that John's living a dream.
My dad coached here. He was a personnel director here, and he definitely wanted to come back here and help the Buccaneers get to the Super Bowl.
The current roster at Hooters was barely born in the mid-'80s, but they still know all about the restaurant's famous alum.
I'm really excited. I think he's back to his roots. I think this is his home. I think he's real excited to come back with us since, he started here, and I think he's going to be a good asset to the company.
And hey, if things with the Bucs don't work out, he'd still be a perfect fit around here. Oh, now, having of course, a well-known former quarterback brother who just happens to be a coach an hour down the road begs the question, will Jay ask John or will John ask Jay to be the Bucs' new quarterbacking coach? And Jay today said that he'd very much like to talk to John about that. Obviously, he'll have to wait for the invitation from his brother. Right now, he says he's basically focusing on the upcoming year with the Orlando Predators, and he may actually come back as a quarterback for that team this year, so still keeping his hand in the game very much. Marty?
Well, it's exciting for that family, and I'm sure John will be dropping in for some wings before too long.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Bob. We have continuing coverage on this story tonight, and Jay Crawford will be back in about 15 minutes with more on the Bucs hiring of John Gruden. Parents often